Chapter 511. Have you protected all that you were supposed to protect? 4. The night sky momentarily turned pure white from Surya's sunlight. Just like how we fought together back in the Demon King selection battles, as well as in the Gigantomachia, Surya's train was rushing towards us. We'll pay the train fare later. With Han Suyong shouting out pompously as our lead, we got on Surya's train. An incredible explosion of sparks occurred at the train's wheels. The vehicle did a huge donut once in the air while emitting loud noises, before shooting straight towards the transparent wall as sonic booms exploded out from its rear. Yi Hyun-seong shouted out, "It's breaking!" Along with the loud crack, the transparent walls began crumbling down. We continued to break past the layers of walls and dashed forward. The final wall, recording the fables of the constellations, was gradually getting closer. The Dakibai King's loud roar was messily intermingling with the fables from the 999th turn. Constellation, Supreme God of Light, is unleashing all of his status. Surya's entire body as he sat in the engine room glowed brightly like a white-hot incandescent sun. Fables dripped out from the wounds visible all over his body. Maybe he too had already paid a hefty price to reach this place. Constellation, Supreme God of Light's Black is final engineer. Even then, his fable didn't stop. Without showing anything outwardly, he used his own body as fuel to operate the Sun train, as if that was his duty as the one who lived until now as the Supreme God of Light. Great Fable, Demon World Spring, is seeing you off on your journey. The power output still isn't enough. Despite his fierce will burning throughout his entire body, the train's speed was gradually slowing down. It was all because the closer we got to the center of the final wall, the thicker the density of the protective walls became. And just before the wall, seemingly made out of net of texts, collided against the front of the train, Jiang Huiwan made her move. "Leave it to me. Hu1SSI, ek." The moment she grabbed Yi Hyun-seong's neck tightly, his body shrunk down rapidly and eventually transformed into a steel sword. And this weapon's blade was soon burning hotly in the flames of the hellfire. Great Fable, Torch that Swallowed the Myth, is seeing you off on your journey. Development/Seung Chinese letter. The fable that illuminated the battlefield of Gigantomachia was now glowing brightly to scorch the final wall. Quack. Truly a stupendous amount of flames gushed out from the front of the train, enveloping the frontal surface of the vehicle in intense heat. Jiang Huiwan, releasing hellfire from her entire body, shouted out in a voice seemingly sizzling in lava. "Fable sh Meeble, it's all going to end right here." Every time her sword glowed brightly, the net of text was torn apart. She wielded her sword over and over again. Even as the sparks from the aftermath storm ravaged her, she didn't forget to improve further upon her way of the sword. This was the path Jiang Huiwan's life had created. We were running on this path. However, it was still not enough. We needed a much stronger power than this. The sentences on the final wall were unfolding in the distance. In that final moment, Uriel reached out towards the sky. "My fable might come to an end today, but there will be a star that shall never forget this story." Great Fable, Season of Light and Darkness, is seeing you off on your journey. The fable of both Uriel and the abyssal black flame dragon crossed the wall to be transmitted. The fables of good and evil collided energetically and protected us, and wings made out of text sprouted from the sides of the train. Just like a roaring apocalypse dragon, the vehicle devoured the walls before our eyes and continued to advance forward. "Stop!" The Dakibai King began chasing after us even before we realized it. Fables flooded out from his arms and legs, and despite the 999th turn's individuals pursuing him, he still extended his arm towards us. Tsu-cha-cha-cha-cha. The probability sparks exploded out from the floor, shaking the train's central axis. The vehicle shook hard, and just as it was about to lose its balance, more sentences floated up above the final wall. The great sage watched the thunder spear fly towards his neck and spoke up. Don't stop, Magnia. The great sage, heaven's equal who never yielded right up until his final moments, was there. At the same time, a man wearing a black coat riding at the rear of the train stood up. Yu Young-hyuk. The secretive plotter possessing Yu Young-hyuk raised his hand to the air. When he did, countless outer gods rose up from amidst the storm of aftermaths occurring on the floor. They weren't the regular nameless ones, either. Great Fable, liberator of the forgotten ones, is seeing you off on your journey. Gagigagogo. We'll help, we'll help, we'll help, we'll help. Didn't forget, didn't forget, didn't forget, didn't forget. The nameless ones that helped us or fought against us during the journey to the west propped up the rocking train. As if this vehicle was a ship riding on the rough waters of the Tangshan River, they were carrying us towards the final wall. You have approached the core of the final wall. Eventually, all the walls protecting the final wall crumbled down. The train was damaged everywhere, and Surya must have had blacked out as he was no longer releasing his fable. Not too far away, we could see the real final wall, a wall far thicker and expansive than any other I had ever seen. This is the wall that I couldn't cross. The secretive plotter spoke up. Is it also not doable this time too? That was the final moment for the 58th turn's Yu Young-hyuk. I made a mistake, but during the next turn, the 96th turn, Yu Young-hyuk closed his eyes in that manner. Countless ends for Yu Young-hyuk streamed by above the wall. It wasn't just him, though. Last hero of Hwangsan Bial, Jayabik continued to shake his eternal rival who'd never wake up again. Goryeo's #1 swordsman and the maritime war god, having lost an arm each, stood back to back and unleashed their final statuses. The wall that recorded the endings of all the constellations. The last moments of all the constellations that included Uriel and the great sage were being recorded on the wall in real time. The companions and I disembarked from the unmoving train and dashed towards the wall. If only those sentences were erased, and if all those tragedies could be stopped. You can't interfere with the final wall's sentences. Applicable paragraphs are prohibited from being overwritten. Please input the cancellation code. The secretive plotter spoke up. No regular methods will work. I've already used physical force before but couldn't destroy this wall. Jiang Huiwan shouted out, we came this far so there must be. From here on it's your job. He was now looking at me. Somewhere within that gaze was the third turn Yu Young-hyuk's, who had completed the scenarios alongside me. What exactly is the conclusion you wish to see? This was what I needed to do in order to answer that question. Yijai opened her mouth. He couldn't do it even after 1863 lifetimes, so, Ajasi, can you really do it? It was as she said. I was not a protagonist like Yu Young-hyuk, nor was I a writer like Han Soo-young. However, because I was neither the protagonist nor the writer, maybe there was something only I could do. Maybe I could remember that one thing that the protagonist couldn't see, and the writer had forgotten all about. The job that only him could do, him that read the ways of survival for a very, very long time. I quietly stared into the final wall. I focused all my attention and read the wall's surface again and again. Not too long after that, the wall radiated brilliantly, just like a certain screen in the past that I had been reading over and over again. 3 ways to survive the destroyed world. Everything from that epic tale was being established within me. I hadn't yet read the final revised version of the ways of survival, which meant I didn't know how this story was supposed to end. However, oh dear unfortunate puppet, you have come far too early. I'm sorry, but beyond here doesn't exist yet. The 1863rd turns Dakibai King from the secretive plotter's memories said that. But what if all these were handed over to me without having been written yet? My companions and I rushed towards the wall. What if someone wanted me to complete this story? Exclusive skill, reading comprehension, is activating beyond the limit. My overheating head felt like it explode, but I kept my eyes wide open and continued to glare at the wall. The fables written on the final wall, Those fables were connecting with each other inside my head. I saw how each fable was connected to another. I saw the cleverly installed narrative devices within the fables and then the context surrounding them. Those that did appear in the novel, but had never been used until its end. When that happened, the previously perfect-looking story began showing gaps within it, gaps that hadn't been filled, things that would be collected as time passed by, things that were waiting for this story's epilogue. Kim Dokya knew exactly what that was. You have awakened a new attribute. Attribute Foreshadow Collector is activating. The story's gaps that only I could have discovered, someone who watched this tale as a reader from the beginning till its end. I stared at the 5 gaps visible on the expansive wall's surface. Hayonga. Leave it to me. The first one to step up was Jang Hayong. She accurately placed her palm on the wall's gap that I pointed out. The wall of impossible communication has discovered its intended position. The final wall, first theme, has been completed. Along with the explosion of blinding light, the wall's fragment slotted back in its spot, and then a single sentence leaked out from there. This tale was a story about an impossible communication. Huiwan SSI Gilyonga. Jiang Huiwan and Yi Gilyong nodded their heads and placed their palms on their own gaps. Then, the 2 portions of the wall that divides the good and evil became one. The wall that divides the good and evil has discovered its intended position. The final wall, second theme, has been completed. This tale was a story about indistinguishable good and evil, and now it was Yu Sangha's turn. Yu Sangha SSI. She slowly walked forward, found her gap and reached out. The wall that decides samsara has discovered its intended position. The final wall's third theme has been completed. And this tale was a story about a tragedy locked in a cycle. With that, 4 gaps had been filled, leaving the last one. I looked up at that empty spot. The last fragment of the final wall. That was the fragment that never appeared in the original novel. Kim Dokya. The 4th wall was addressing me. The 4th wall. Both it and I knew exactly what we needed to do here. A blinding fragment made up of texts floated up above my palm. Those texts were now talking to me. I Liki Yar Sonori. I couldn't say anything. While unable to say anything, I ran towards that last empty gap and slotted the fragment inside. This tale was a story of a reader who wanted to change its conclusion. Right next moment, an incredible shower of sparks exploded from the wall. The code has been lifted. The wall's authority was opening up towards me. The secrets of the wall that even Yu Young-hyuk couldn't cross was now streaming into me. The sentence of the constellations floated up right before my eyes. It was the last sentence of the great sage and Uriel that I wanted to stop so badly. The blades flying in at the necks of the great sage and Uriel. I powerfully grabbed that sentence. Su-cha-cha-cha-cha. It felt like my hand was set on fire. Fables clung onto me and stabbed into my hand like sharp blades. However, I held on. I couldn't let this sentence end like that. The final wall is puzzled by your actions. The final wall is asking you, wasn't this the story you wanted? I didn't want it. Who would want a conclusion like this? Stop, I said, stop that right now. The Dakibai king persistently chased after us, fables dripping from all over his body. Thick murderous aura was filling up his eyes. You must not touch the wall. You'll regret it. There is nothing beyond this wall. Not even what you wished for, not even what you wanted to see. He was wrong. The most ancient dream was beyond this wall. Weni King. The Weni King hiding within my shadow, imprisoned the Dakibai king's body. Finally, we meet again, my old friend. The Weni King. Go on ahead, Kim Dokya. Fulfill our agreement. I didn't let go of the sentence still in my hand. The blades flying in at the necks of the great sage and Uriel W. While grabbing hold of that W, I prevented the next vowel from generating. Along with Pushushuk noise, my fingers were sliced off. Fables leaking out non-stop screamed out. You are not the Dakibai king. You cannot stop the progress of the applicable fable. It was then something soft enveloped the back of my hand, accompanied by the baat noise. With every ounce of her energy she could summon, Bu rubbed her whole body against that sentence as if she had become an eraser. The storyteller had sided with Dakya / the reader. Along with Bu, I smacked down on the sentence with everything I got, over and over again. I swung my fist at the unstoppable sentence, then even stabbed it with my sword. Please, please, please. And eventually, very faintly, cracks were developing on the letters. The already written sentences were scattering away. The conclusion was changing. T-Bades flying an ayat T-neck of great and Urel. The broken words initiated a storm of powerful sparks, before transforming into something I couldn't read at all. Black black blade, black 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 sage, black 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 black. Ooh. Countless outer gods howled out. Their cries even sounded reverential, as if they were exalting a great god. I held my hand that bled fables non-stop and witnessed the wall's surface changing. Shin Yuseung had come closer without me realizing it to tightly hold my hand. Ajasi, you have acquired a new great fable. Great fable, one who breaks the final wall, has been acquired. Great fable, one who breaks the final wall, is continuing on with its storytelling. Starstream is seeing you off on your journey. As the messages exploded inside my head, the wall before our eyes collapsed. The fables written on the wall and our own were now getting all jumbled up. Countless black square S were spinning around in sync, and that made them resemble circles. And just beyond those pitch-black circles, I thought I could see something. Ha 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 ha, this is it. As per our agreement, I shall be the first one to confirm what's beyond the final wall. The Weni king shoved the Dakibai king aside and jumped right into the black circle. And as the latter began crying in despair, the blade of dark heavenly demon sword pierced his throat cleanly. My companions ran up to me. Everything in this world was crumbling down. The final wall, the star stream, everything was collapsing. The broken wall was getting jumbled up with the companions' fables. It became gradually impossible to tell apart what was a fable and what was reality. Something beyond the circle was looking at this side. I too stared right back at it. Just what is that? Little by little it became harder to breathe. Something was sucking me in. Everything I experienced, felt, and judged were now streaming above the final wall in sloppy, broken sentences. Every one. I couldn't figure out whether I was saying that or the wall was. I was now simply a description on that wall. Some sentences could only be seen faintly, while some others couldn't be seen at all. Eventually, all the flowing sentences began disappearing one at a time. Slowly, so agonizingly slowly. Just like that, every sentence above the wall came to a black circle. Episode 98. Have you protected all that you were supposed to protect? 4. Finn. Chapter 512. The Most Ancient Dream 1. Within this faint light, gently and warmly embracing his entire body, the Weni king was curled up in a fetal position, dreaming of a certain dream. That was a very ancient dream, a tale from well before his black square had been decided. He was collapsed on the floor of a tainted forest. Epsilon, we only have to go a little bit further. The Demon King's castle is almost within reach. In this tale, he was a warrior subjugating the Demon King. A warrior that had set off on the Demon King's subjugation expedition to protect his world. Unfortunately, he didn't get to fulfill his long-cherished desire. Just before the subjugation went underway, he had to close his eyes. His friends faced the last thing he saw. Gilbert. The scene changed, and now it displayed a war zone. He was now a man from Murim, kitted out in a set of black-colored garments of a knightly operative. Senior Brother Kwok, the main base of the demonic cult bastards, is right over there. He saw the face of his comrade filling up his view. Longing quickly filled him up. She was the person he loved the most out of all the lives he had lived. "It's too late for me. Junior sister, please go on ahead." A whistling noise of an arrow flying in from somewhere later. His vision blackened once more. His head was pounding away. As memories overflowed, the Wenny King's ego was shaking unsteadily. Were these scenes from his own memories, or stories from the final wall? Where did this story begin, and where would it end? Independent of his will, the tale continued on. He was now a young hatchling. He was also a monstrous creature without a name. He was an expert from Murim, and also a knight from medieval times. And every time that happened, he was an incarnation clearing the scenarios. The last thing he heard in front of the final wall was the voice coming from a shadow without a name. "My friend, even during our next life, accompany me." He gasped out loudly and opened his eyes, only to be greeted by the pitch-black darkness. The cold sweat soaking the nape of his neck sent deathly chills all over his body. "I'm the Wenny King." That was his name. He did have a real name, but that had been forgotten a long time ago. No, he couldn't even be certain whether that was really his name or not. Am I really the Wenny King? Within the swirling pitch-black vacuum, the Wenny King fell into deep contemplation. It was the kind of contemplation he had never entertained after surpassing the limits of mortality. Who am I? The fable acting as the foundation of his existence was now shaking unsteadily. In order to regain himself at any cost, he began ruminating over his own memories. In the beginning, there was a Wenny. He was the first storyteller, a human that sang about fables. But one day, Dakibus appeared in the world and those Dakibus took away the Wenny's song. That was all he needed to remember. Remember that those damned Dakibus took away the Wenny's song. Remember the fact that they expelled him from the star stream scenarios by stealing away his nativity fable. You look confused, my old friend. The Wenny King was startled by that true voice and hurriedly looked behind him. The face of the Dakibai King was floating within the pitch-black darkness. Dakibai King. The former growled and unleashed his status. However, things didn't go according to plan. Within this space where nothing existed, the status he emitted only left behind faint sparks. The Dakibai King spoke with a disinterested expression. "You aren't allowed to fight in here. Our powers aren't valid in this place. You somehow managed to survive. I thought that you died at the blade of that puppet. It's not much different from having died already, and will die again, too." In the spot where the Dakibai King's gaze landed, they could see a circular exit of light swirling around. The soul forms of these two beings were slowly heading towards that exit. The Wenny King shouted out, "No, hold on. My fable has just begun. I will be crossing over the final wall. I shall encounter the lazy god that imagined everything of this world and become the sole creature that knows the secret of this world. Are you that curious about this world's secret? You speak of something obvious. There isn't a single creature not curious about the origin of their own birth. And that's precisely the reason why creatures become unhappy." The Dakibai King spoke in a self-deprecating manner. "Why do you think creatures possess the wonderful ability called forgetfulness?" The fabled debris was scattering away within the darkness. Stories that had lost their context became just lumps of text and slowly broke away. They were now stories that no one could read anymore. The Dakibai King gently caressed them before crushing that fable into powder. There are far too many unnecessary stories in this universe. A process is required in order to eliminate them and to optimize everything. That is what forgetfulness is. Rubbish, the universe is infinite, just like how the end of the final wall doesn't exist. Even if there are plenty of blank margins left on the wall, just how much of that do you think is permitted to the measly extras? The Dakibai King looked down at his own body, slowly crumbling away. Unfortunately, the protagonist the final wall has chosen is neither you or me. I don't know what rubbish you're trying to spew here, but even then, you shall soon meet the one you so dearly wish to meet. It was then the Wenny King's shoulders flinched. The exit of light could be seen. It was such a rapturous, resplendent light. The exit was spinning vigorously, and it somewhat resembled a full stop of a certain world. The Wenny King suddenly grew scared. Have you seen what's beyond that?" The Dakibai King didn't reply immediately. He had this expression of boredom, as if all sentences held no meaning after the full stop itself. Still, he did add a comment in the end. "What meaning is there anyway?" "What?" "I'm saying, what meaning is there to knowing that this world was just a portion of a vast dream?" His words contained endless futility of it all. The Wenny King couldn't understand what was being said. The light was getting brighter, yet the expression on the Dakibai King was getting blurrier. Soon, the exit of light was literally right before his nose. The worried Wenny King asked, "Why did you continue on with Starstream until now?" Maybe that question was unexpected. The Dakibai King's expression changed bizarrely. He quietly stared at the Wenny King before making his reply. "I wonder, I can't remember it anymore." In that moment, several fables overlapped on the Dakibai King's face. At once, he looked like a warrior subjugating the Demon King, an expert from the dangerous world of Murim battling the demonic sect, and a hatchling spreading its wings towards the wide-open sky. He was. Kim Dakya has opened a door that should have never been opened, and so, this world will forever be mired in misfortune. At the end of those words, the world was blanketed by pure light. They had finally reached the exit. The Wenny King staggered unsteadily and set foot inside that light. He brushed past the rays of light and tread forward little by little. The answer was here. The most ancient dream that created this world was here. However, the Wenny King couldn't see anything. The noisy blaring of hooters could be heard coming from somewhere. A thick, choking smell that wetted his nose. It became harder and harder to breathe. His body began burning up under the rays of light. As if this blank margin wasn't permitted to him. "I told you, this story is neither yours or mine." Along with the Dakibai King's words, the Wenny King's body began melting down. "We are simply tools of this world, that's all." Even though his legs melted away, followed by his torso, the Wenny King never shifted his gaze away from the spectacle before his eyes. That was where the most ancient dream was. The secret of everything in this world was there. That something he had been searching for forever was there. The Wenny King saw it, and then finally understood what the Dakibai King was saying earlier. That is indeed. The Wenny King wished to shout out so desperately. To shout out, "Please look this way. Please, I'm right here. Please look at me just once." And then that slowly shifted its head. However, by the time its gaze reached where the Wenny King was, the latter was no longer existing in that place. So that shifted its head away. And while keeping its head down, it began muttering about something once more. Cough. I felt something scratchy inside my mouth after coughing a bit. I spat out the stuffed-up breath, and insect-like things leaked out. I took a look and realized that they were letters. Sensations returned and my vision brightened. I saw the letters emitting bright white light before my eyes. They were of familiar contents. "Just where is this?" "Dakya SSI, you might get sucked into the book if you do that." Suddenly, the back of my neck grew cold. That was a familiar voice, and with words I had heard somewhere before. Horrifying imagination made a right old mess of my mind. I once thought that if I destroyed the final wall, something like this might happen. However, to think that such a thing would really. Then, accompanied by flapping noises, torn bits of paper danced around before my eyes. I took another closer look and discovered someone lightly shaking a book around. Usanga SSI. Usanga was standing before my eyes. The surrounding view gradually grew clearer. It was the view of discarded books forming small mounds, as well as bookshelves lining up with nary a space in between, all illuminated by the faint light from a lantern. This wasn't the subway. This was the location I was quite familiar with. Usanga grinned brightly. "This place feels so cozy to me now." We were inside the fourth wall. What happened? Even if you ask me. I also woke up just now, you see. Should we go and look for my librarian seniors? As Yu Sang-ah shrugged her shoulders and began scanning the surroundings, I quickly organized what happened to us so far in my head. We had gathered all the fragments of the final wall and eventually brought it down. The memory of the square circle spinning around was still vivid in my mind. And then what happened afterwards? What about the other companions? Duent wo rry Kim Dakya. A voice I thought I could never hear again entered my ears. I shouted out in happiness. The fourth wall. Silenci in the library. This was definitely the fourth wall that I remembered, that sly playfulness included. Separate from how happy I was, though, my puzzlement only grew even bigger instead. Why was I inside the fourth wall right now? Dakya SSI. More voices could be heard coming from the darkness. They were from the Kim Dakya Company's companions. Just where are we? I found a strange book here. It's called Kim Dakya and the Mysteries of Sex. You should definitely not be looking at such things, Jai Haya. How about this one then? If they have their Bibles, then Kim Dakya has the ways of survival. You really want to read something like that? I thought I could hear Jiang Hui-wan and Yi Jai-hai speaking to each other. And then, a pair of small heads popped out from a nearby mound of books as if they were moles. Ajasi. Hayoung. It was Shin Yu-seung and Yi Gil-yong. I could also see Han Soo-yong walking towards us in the darkened view. What a weird place this is. Is this that library Yu Sang-ah talked about before? She pulled out a book from the shelf to toss it behind her. Meanwhile, Yi Hyun-seong standing behind her caught that and stuffed it inside his inner pocket. Soo-yong SSI, you shouldn't handle books so carelessly. You don't even know what these things are. Wowie, what's this? Sounds fun. Behind them, I spotted the unconscious Gong Pil-du, Jang Ha-yong and Anna Croft lying on the floor. And finally, Yi Hwa checking for their pulses. At the very least, all of my companions that participated in the final scenario were gathered here. In At-Ev Uri 1. I got this rather bad premonition after hearing the fourth wall's voice. I still couldn't see that guy yet. Could it be? Ha 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 ha, Yu Young-hyuk. I can smell him somewhere nearby. Did he finally show up here in order to become one with me? A voice loudly reverberated out from within the deep darkness. It was obviously coming from Nirvana. And right next second, a dull impact noise rang out. The now silent Nirvana's limp body rolled around on the floor, and then a certain black combat boot trampled that poor Sob's head. What an unpleasant space this is. Yu Young-hyuk. Sparks were still faintly dancing around him as if he hadn't yet separated from the secretive plotter. Since he's here too, who was it that couldn't come? Constellations aren't here. What happened to everyone back on Earth? The fourth wall, evacuating us here, could only mean that some sort of a problem had occurred in the outside world. My heart was now growing icy cold. I recalled the fourth wall, as well as the sentences above it, shattering into million pieces. What went wrong? Did the world perish because I tried to change the story? It was then the fourth wall said something completely unexpected. Taimi not mav ing bikao si not re adding not ima jin ing. Even before I could ask about the meaning of that, some creatures appeared first. Have you finally broken the wall, the apostle of eternity and epilogue? Such a day has indeed arrived before us. They were the librarians, devourer of dreams and simulation. I stared at them first before addressing the fourth wall. Let me out of here, there's something I need to confirm. That prompted the librarians to reply instead. Even if it's you, you still won't survive by going outside. Star Stream no longer exists. Everything in that place has now come to a dead stop. Everything had stopped. For sure, the fables that could normally be heard over the wall couldn't be heard anymore. Instead, the noise akin to a giant spring winding up could be heard coming from somewhere. It was at once like the ticking of a watch's second hand, or even the sound of very consistent but slow, rhythmic typing of a keyboard. In that case, I'll go and meet the guy that'll wind the clock back. Do you really wish to go and meet the most ancient dream? That being was at the final stop of all these stories. Star Stream might have been destroyed, but there was a question that needed to be answered still. Why did a world like this have to exist? I looked back to discover my companions making similar expressions to each other. Every one of us had their own questions they wanted answers for, and had certain ends they wanted to see. And in order to get there was something we definitely had to do first. Yu Sang-ah spoke up first. Let's go together, Dakya SSI. Me too, I want to go. I'm really curious about the epilogue you wanted to see, Ajasi. There. Let's not agonize about this, shall we? Who knows, maybe a really nice Dakibai is waiting for us there or something. If not, we can smack him around for a bit and make him more agreeable too. As if to agree with that, Bu added her own opinion. But it was around then that Yu Younghyuk broke the silence he had been observing. Before that, do you even have a way to meet him? The wall might be destroyed, but the time flow of the outside world has stopped. If time isn't moving, fables cannot move forward. It will be the same for us. There are some places where time hasn't stopped. Nirvana smiled and pointed to the floor. Right, the time inside this library hadn't stopped at all. Could that bastard be inside this library? That's not it. This library is also just another wall, you see. However, a new passageway has opened up after you have completed the story, meaning you can now cross over to the other side. While saying that, Nirvana guided us somewhere. Somehow, I thought I knew where he was taking us. I recalled the cliff that spanned below the library. This is the end of the library, the end of all stories. The vast, bottomless pit, a valley laid out like the abyss itself. It was the location I discovered back when I entered the fourth wall for the first time. It's exactly that place. I almost fell to the bottom there when I first stumbled in here. Back then, Nirvana told me that if I fell in there, I'd die for sure. He said that was beyond the wall. Nirvana asked me, Kim Dakya, do you really wish to go over there? I nodded my head. Then Nirvana pulled at a rope hanging from the darkness. I thought something like a pulley was activating. Then a small elevator-like thing slowly rose up from below. Get on. We all climbed aboard this elevator. Then we were slowly lowered into the pit. Exclusive attribute, one who looked into the abyss, is initializing. Finally, the answers I've been searching for was right before my eyes. Fables still remaining within me were getting agitated as well. Just how long did we climb down like this? We were eventually greeted by the sounds of the pulley stopping. I stepped foot on the darkness, only to be greeted by moldy smell. The floor was slick and damp, too, almost like the remnants of a structure that hadn't been used for a very long time. The light from the lantern illuminated the front to reveal a faint line made up of yellowish blocks. Isn't this place? Jiang Huiwan muttered to herself. And right then, we heard the noise of something rushing towards us from the darkness past the yellow blocks. As a matter of fact, the darkness itself was shaking ominously now. It was a loud, explosive noise, as if a monster was madly dashing towards us. A short while later, a pair of faint monstrous eyes appeared from the other side of the passageway. Oh my God! Jiang Huiwan muttered out, but didn't reach for her sword even after witnessing what kind of a monster it was. The rest of the companions reacted the same, as well, all because everyone knew exactly what that monster was. The beginning of all these stories. It was the subway. Episode 99, The Most Ancient Dream 1 Fin. Chapter 513, Episode 99, The Most Ancient Dream 2. The subway train slowed down before coming to a stop before us, and then opened its doors. There was no mistaking it. This was the subway we all recognized. Jiang Huiwan's lips bobbed up and down before finally breaking the silence first. Why would a subway show up here? Of course, no one here could answer that question. The first one to make his move was Yi Gil-yong. Yu Sang-ah shouted out, Gil-yong-ah, you mustn't get on that tease. The boy fearlessly stepped foot inside and climbed aboard the subway and turned around to look at us. As if nothing was going on, he shrugged his shoulders. Yijai watched that spectacle, then grabbed Shin Yuseung's hand and stepped forward as well. I don't know anymore. Let's just get in first and see what's what. That was the beginning. Other companions, still hesitating, entered the subway one by one. I too followed after them. The moment I set foot on the floor of the subway that trembled ever so slightly, I was overcome with déjà vu. Once upon a time, this was all of Kim Dakya's world. No, that was wrong. This was not my world. This was everyone's and anyone's world. For Yu Sanga, Jiang Huiwan, Yi Hyunseong, and Yi Jaihai, too, everyone carried their own different expressions. Just like how I rode on this subway and lived my daily life, it should roughly be the same story with them as well. Someone used to be an office worker, someone was a student, and someone used to be a soldier, but still. A subway is it. Back then, I was really fed up of riding it, but now, I'm really happy to see it again. Jiang Huiwan's words made us carefully scan the interior of the subway itself. All the seats were brand new, while the safety bars were wiped clean too. Not even a hint of filth could be seen on the floor. Of course, what proved to be even more surprising than that was, by the way, why isn't anyone else riding in this thing? Not a single presence could be felt within the subway. This was a sterile, inorganic space where nothing was alive besides us. This vehicle was permeated with such a sense of abnormality. I looked at the librarians remaining outside the subway and asked them, "Aren't you joining us? You wanted to witness the end of the world too, didn't you?" "We can't go with you." "How come?" Nirvana and the other librarians didn't answer. They exchanged somewhat saddened gazes with each other before finally making their reply. "Witnessing the end will be enough for. The doors are closing." The rest of their words couldn't be heard. The doors shut close, and accompanied by the noises of a giant cartwheel turning, the subway began chugging forward. Its speed was neither quick nor slow, and outside the windows we saw the view of the pitch-black darkness lazily shifting past us. I gazed into that darkness for a long time. Just where was this train taking us? "It's the line number 3. Han Soo-young muttered that out. I also looked up at the subway map. The line number 3. It was the line that I used to commute every day. Strangely, though, the ends of the map were broken off. Even the names of the stations were erased as well. Meanwhile, the subway continued to chug along. Several minutes passed by since then, but it showed no signs of stopping. It seemed that this vehicle was planning to run straight to its final stop without a break. With a plop noise, Han Soo-young settled down on the cushion next to mine. She glared at the subway map, her long eyelashes blinking constantly. I asked her, "What's up with that expression?" "I don't ride on stuff like subways." "Why not?" Almost immediately, I realized what a dumb question that was. For sure, someone like her wouldn't have a need to ride on subways anyway. What she said next was completely out of my expectations, though. "I mean, there's nothing to see here, both inside and out." We both stared at the broken subway map. Without a doubt, a subway train would travel the exact same line every single day. It would then stop at the predetermined time. Similar things would continue to happen within these unchanging sceneries every day. I also hated subways. I used to stare at the smartphone during commuting for a similar reason to hers, too. Subways don't operate for our amusement, though. Oh my, now that's not something the constellation, Demon King of Salvation, would say. I smiled bitterly. We stared in the same direction next, at our companions. At the people who endured the apocalypse with me, cleared 99 scenarios together, and reached this place. We won't suddenly go back to the first scenario, or something like that, right? No, that can't be, definitely not. Should I ready some grasshoppers just in case? The companions saw Yi Gil-yong clenching his fist with a resolute expression, and broke out in smirks. What did it mean to find humor from the most horrifying memory they held? With what kind of thoughts were they smiling at that story? I spoke to Han Soo-young. They need to go back to their old lives. You think they'll be happier like that? All stories are supposed to end that way. And since when did you start enjoying that sort of development? Han Soo-young shot back with a retort. Hey, you aren't thinking up of anything weird again, right? Are you hiding something from me again? I'd like to, but I've nothing to hide anymore. I was being honest. Even the original novel never reached this far. It was the same story for the secretive plotter or the other individuals from the 999th turn. We were the first to ride on this subway. I spoke up while looking at the end of the faintly erased subway map. Han Soo-young, I think. Could it be that a final boss is waiting for us there? Isn't that how it normally is? Jiang Hui-wan said that. She wasn't talking to me, however. It seemed that the companions were busy discussing something over there. Shin Yu-seung added her opinion. Maybe there's a dragon this big. But I don't think a modifier like the most ancient dream would get assigned to a dragon. To get a modifier like that, it must be. Couldn't it be the author? The author? You know that. When Yi Gil-yong saying that shifted his gaze in my direction, the other companions seemed to abruptly recall it, too, and all turned their heads towards me. 3 Ways to Survive a Destroyed World. They also knew about that novel now. They knew that that novel described the stories of this world, and that only I had read it to its conclusion. What do you think, Dr. SSI? Every novel out there couldn't become stories, unless a writer wrote them down first. The suspicion my companions held some weight if this world was based off on the ways of survival. For sure, there was a good chance that the most ancient dream was the writer. I too thought that way. However, why do I? I don't think the most ancient dream is the author of the ways of survival. Why do you think that? I'm not sure, but I have a hunch. To me, the being at the end of this line didn't seem like it'd be TLS 123. I recalled what the Dokubai King said back then. Rather than an author, you could say that the most ancient dream is much closer to being a reader. It's not an existence that writes stories for someone else. It's lazy and can be quite greedy, you see. I even began questioning whether an author was necessary in our current hypothesis. Did this world really begin because of TLS 123? Maybe TLS 123 simply alerted me to the already existing world instead. Just like how the secretive plotter or the other individuals from the 999th turn existed even though they weren't recorded in the pages. Now that I think about, I'm curious. Dr. SSI, how did you stumble across that novel in the first place? I was also curious about that. Yu Young-hyuk, disinterestedly polishing the dark heavenly demon sword, shifted his gaze towards me when that topic was brought up. Jang Ha-young asked as her eyes sparkled. Was it like some kind of a fateful attraction? I also know something about such a feeling. The first time I held a grenade back when I was a private eye. I just came across it while browsing the net, actually. Companions seemed to be disappointed by my reply, but nothing could be done about that because it's true. Han Soo-young then retorted back. What did you search for exactly to find such a crappy novel? That is, I couldn't remember it all that well now. Yi Jai-hai shrugged her shoulders. Oh, well, it's not that important now, right? The only thing that matters is that Ajasi did read that novel somehow. That's right. What would have happened if Dr. SSI didn't read that novel? I looked at Yu Sang-ah grinning brightly and shut my mouth tightly. I didn't deserve to hear those words. In the end, stars fell and the world came to a stop. We were marching towards a conclusion no one in the ways of survival managed to reach, but there was no guarantee that what I wanted was waiting at the end of the line. I, too, had no knowledge of the things about to happen from now on. What if it was someone else who read that novel to its end? There were better-suited people than me here. The righteous Jiang Hui-wan, the trusty Yi Hyun-seong, the straight-shooter Yu Sang-ah, they should have been the one to read the novel. If that happened, maybe the world would have ended up in a far better shape than this. Thank you, Ajasi, for reading that novel. Shin Yuseung matched my eye level and was now smiling. That's right. I heard that novel was really boring too, if it really wasn't for Dakya SSI. If it was me, I probably couldn't get past the first page. I really hate books, you know. I tried to read a couple of books back inside the Oz military library, but, as expected, me and reading were not really a. While looking at Yeonseong scratching his head, I somehow managed to force my mouth shut. Because the ways of survival existed, the people before me existed too. And because I read that novel, I was able to save them from the dangers. I, someone of no redeeming quality, could be loved by the others. Because of the fables you taught me, I managed to get this far, Hyung. The kid's small hands were tightly holding onto mine. I slowly raised my head and saw the darkness of the subway streaming by, and the fables we lived through were passing us by within that darkness. We silently observed those fables. They were as beautiful as the Milky Way in the wintry night sky, yet just as futile as the fireworks going off. Stories that none among us could forget, but we'd do so eventually. Jiang Hui-wan opened her mouth. Doc Yosssi, I think it's fine to ask this now, so. I knew already what she wanted to ask me. What exactly is the conclusion you want to see, Doc Yosssi? No constellations were looking at us now. Even star stream that ruled over the world no longer existed. So there was no reason to not tell them. I've already seen one of them. I carefully peered into the faces of all my companions. No sentences floated up on their expressions. Even then, I could tell what the conclusion I wanted to see from their faces. And the other one is to repay my debt. Your debt? I shifted my head to discover Yu Yonghyuk glaring at me. Kugugugu. Along with the dull vibration, the train's speed began to decrease little by little. We slowly got up from our seats. Once noisy companions began speaking less and less. Nervousness was filling up their expressions. I slowly approached the exit. Jiang Hui-wan stood to my left, while Yu Yonghyuk was on my right. The fables passing by in the darkness were slowing down. It wasn't just our story existing out there, however. There was the 0th turn, then the first turn. Also the second and the third turns too. And that's how 1864 regression cycles have gathered, and in turn, opened up this world. Countless Yu Yonghyuks lived through those turns. Although none of them lived the right way, not one could be called wrong too. The world was far too cruel a place to debate the ethics of life, and the volume of despair was far too great to tell the tale of hope. However, Yu Yonghyuk remained resolute because he didn't try to justify himself. His sole desire to see the end of this world. I too carried that same desire. That was the dream of 1865 Yu Yonghyuk's existing from the 0th to the 1864th regression turns, and the end of the world that I wanted, too. It's really been long, wasn't it? Yu Yonghyuk shot back, as if to question what the hell I was even saying here. It's only been 4 years, Kim Dakya, compared to the time I experienced it's. Right. 4 years. That was how long we had been fighting together. 4 years that felt like a lifetime. When I said that, Jiang Hui-wan to my left lightly poked me with her sword's hilt. We'll still stick together from now on too, so why do you sound so grimly determined? Don't worry. No matter what kind of a monster is waiting for us, I'll finish it off. I gently smiled. Meanwhile, the subway was slowing down even further. My reflection could be seen in the black window of the exit door. There was a splatter of blood on my cheek reflected on the glass. I wiped it off my face, and then my mood cooled down. The blood was really on my cheek and not on the window. Doors are opening. Along with Yeonseong's cry, everyone got ready to fight. ING. However, contrary to everyone's nervousness, what greeted us was a rather empty subway platform. Sure, there were a few people walking around in the surroundings, but none of them paid us much attention. What's this? There's no. Jiang Hui-wan muttered that out, and as we stepped onto the platform, I was overcome with an ominous foreboding. There it was, the unfamiliar sense of reality touching my feet. Faint sparks, along with every single one of my fables, were pointing in a certain direction. Someone was sitting on the subway's bench. A thick school bag filled with textbooks, as if its owner had left school not too long ago. A thin, small-statured child who might have passed off as an elementary schooler were it not for his school uniform, was sitting on that bench. As if he was trying to memorize English words, he was busy scribbling something like a chart on his notebook. As the pulsing migraine assaulted me, I somehow managed to lift my unmoving feet. Kim Dokya made a promise to end the culprit who made this world, no matter what that existence was. Maybe he was struck by someone somewhere. There was a big bruising on the kid's pale arm, a bruising that I could more or less figure out where he got it from. All strength left my legs and I couldn't move anymore. Time isn't moving because not reading and not imagining. I did think that all of this could be a dream, a lie. I even believed that this was a dream the evil Starstream had created. But now I couldn't deny it anymore. All of my senses were telling me the truth. They said that that child was the culprit behind all these scenarios. Why we real ria die expecting this dient you Kim Dokya? The most ancient dream, the world's most omniscient yet powerless God. The fourth wall's influence is getting weaker. Kim Dok. The fourth wall's influence is getting extremely weak. I thought I heard something fall to the floor, and I saw Jiang Huiyuan's sword rolling around on the ground. She was now looking at me. She was looking at the child, then back at me. Her eyes were filling up with despair. As if she couldn't believe this. As if she'd prefer that this whole thing turned out to be a lie. The promise with the secretive plotter is activating. I opened my mouth only to close it several times. Maybe this might be my punishment. It might very well be the time to pay the price for the salvation I received. You have promised to destroy Starstream. Starstream will not be destroyed unless the most ancient dream is ended. I now stared at the child with the exact same face as mine. And the boy slowly raised his head to look back at me. Please end the most ancient dream. Episode 99, The Most Ancient Dream 2 Finn. Chapter 514, The Most Ancient Dream 3. My consciousness kept trying to blank out. What would it be like if the ways of survival was real? Whether that was my own thoughts, or something that was recorded on the final wall, or maybe even if there was a world where I can fight alongside the characters from the ways of survival. The imaginations of the most ancient dream, I couldn't be sure. Countless memories rushed in like a sudden incoming wave. Imaginations that unfolded in a messy cacophony became the fuel for the stories in another world. The living reality had become the tragedy. Wait, now that I think about it, what happens to the old world after Yu Younghyuk regresses? I should ask the authornim in the comment section. I always thought that I remembered the ways of survival better than anyone else. I was proud that I had read the novel diligently, much more so than anyone else too. So why couldn't I recall much about myself that read the novel? Maybe I was. You have become the character. Sparks overflowed above my incarnation body. The fourth wall's functions were coming to a halt. My heart was madly pounding away, and unidentifiable screams reverberated within my devastated mind. My head faltered, and I somehow managed to suck in several deep breaths. The fourth wall was right. Maybe I already knew. There were simply too many hints. I was far too lucky in this world, and everything in this world seemed to be geared towards my convenience, and at times this world even felt sloppy. If all of these were the result of the most ancient dream's blessing, then the genesis of all the world lines, the original world line. I raised my head back up, then clenched my energyless fists slowly. The fourth wall was no longer around, but my mind was calm. No, I had to believe that I was calm. Only I knew the conclusion of this world. The unbreakable faith screeched out. I slowly walked forward. The boy raised his head up from the notebook to look at me. Suja Chachu. Enough. The boy's eyes, that didn't know anything. I couldn't avoid that gaze. Those were the eyes of a child who had no one to rely on in this world, somehow managing to carry on day by day. The boy, busy rubbing his eyes hard as if he saw phantoms, was looking at me. In order to destroy Starstream, the most ancient dream must be stopped. I had made up my mind at the beginning of Starstream and even promised the secretive plotter to eliminate the culprit of all these tragedies, and finally, that opportunity had come. Demon King transformation is activating. Pitch-black wings spread out from the torn shoulder blades. The boy's eyes looking at me widened. A voice that felt so ancient. Right, I used to possess such a voice in the past, didn't I? I walked one step at a time towards such a child. Angel transformation is activating. As the child's face grew closer, I got to see so many other things, such as the notebook the boy was scribbling on. There was a chart recording the power balance of the ways of survival. It was the very same chart that I compiled once upon a time. Yu Yonghyok, Yi Hyun-seong, Shin Yu-seung, Yi Jai-hai, Yi Seol-hwa, Kim Nam-woon, Anna Croft. Next to the densely packed names, their stigmata and skills were recorded. And finally, even the bruising on the back of the boy's hand covering up his own untidy handwriting. I knew the history this boy had survived, and the future he'd get to live out. What would happen to this child in the future, and what sort of misery lay in wait for him? All of those years, just how much of a meaning was in them? He'd get targeted by the school gang and suffer serious bullying. He'd get abandoned by his relatives and start living alone far too soon. And wherever he went, he'd be pursued by the reporters hunting him down. He'd make a mistake during the university entrance exam and end up in a third-rate school. He'd get unlucky and pull the shortest straw during the boot camp and get assigned to the front lines. He'd fill himself up every day with triangular-shaped kimbap bought from the local convenience store. And eventually, stumble into a job with some no-name company by the skin of his teeth and eke out a living that way. During the period of 10 years, he'd get to finish reading a certain novel, and after surviving by reading that novel, he'd drive everyone he loved to utter misery. That boy would grow up to become Kim Dakya, a monster. The child was opening his mouth while looking at me. That's right, I'm a monster. My appearance was reflected on the boy's irises. That monster was this child's future. Now was the only chance to stop that monster. Everything happened in the blink of an eye. Me, trying to rush forward with my sword raised up, and Han Soo-young's fist striking me in the face, all of them. I couldn't really hear her voice. She was shouting something at me. Her reddened eyes were filled with tears. Her fists were pounding down on my chest before her rough hands tried to hold onto my shoulders. Dakya. I shoved her away, and then took another step forward. Even though the distance was only a few meters, I couldn't easily cross it. All of my fables were rebelling against me. Powerful sparks enveloping my entire frame suppressed me. My feet didn't want to leave the floor, and my hands refused to move. The child's expression as he looked at me was one of terror. His chin trembled non-stop, so did his eyes. Those eyes trying to decipher whether this was reality or not. The most ancient dream is questioning your existence. The existence that dreamed of all these worlds. And in his dream, I too was nothing more than just another character. Su-cha-cha-cha-cha. The most ancient dream is denying your existence. As if he wanted to reject reality, the child hugged his head and curled up. I'm Yu Young-hyuk. I'm. The chant that had been recited tens of thousands of times. There is a protective barrier around me. Nobody can harm me. Nothing can touch me. The thoughts he used to escape from the pain when the gangs beat him up began leaking out. The power that rendered reality into not reality. And that power was now being applied in the opposite manner. Aegis. This really small but absolute being was now thinking of everything before him as his own delusions. An opaque barrier was generating with the child's figure as its center, resembling a pitch-black sphere. It was the sturdiest protective barrier that the most ancient dream could create. I cried out like a devil and rushed towards the barrier to swing my sword. As the worlds collided, a blindingly bright explosion of light went off. The blade of the unbreakable faith easily broke apart and flew in the air. I stared helplessly at the flying blade piece. I can't kill him. It was impossible for a way to kill him to exist. If this story began from the dream of the younger me, then the rules of this world were thought up by him, too. Winds powerfully blowing in from somewhere roughly flipped the pages of the child's fallen notebook. When the flipping stopped, the setting of the ways of survival the younger me jotted down could be seen on the page. The disconnected film theory, a theory that explains the overlapping of the world lines in the ways of survival, and it. As the sparks faintly danced about, I dazedly read the contents. I read it and then read it some more. I bent down to pick up the broken blade, then opened up all the fables still remaining in me. I stared at the black sphere surrounding the boy and spoke up. I know you better than anyone in this world. Don't torment me, don't torment me, don't torment me. I'm not trying to torment you. I want to run away. I know. But where to? The child's story was transmitted to me, while mine also was transmitted to him. Sujajajut. There were less than 2 hand spans of broken blade remaining in the unbreakable faith. However, that was sufficient enough to carry out my plan. The method to end the most ancient dream. The disconnected film theory is activating. Your existence is resonating with the most ancient dream. I then stabbed the blade into my neck with every ounce of my energy. The loud pawuk noise resounded out. Crimson blood dripped onto the floor like teardrops. Kim Dakya. The blood belonged to Yu Young-hyuk. The blade was stopped midair right before my neck, unable to move an inch. Blue veins were bulging on Yu Young-hyuk's hand, holding the blade tightly. All of you hold him down. It wasn't just Yu Young-hyuk, though someone had grabbed me from behind to suppress me. Dakyo SSI, this is wrong. It was Yi Hyun-seong. Both of my arms were grabbed too. Jiang Hui-won and Yu Sang-ah were responsible. Please stop. There must be another way. There has to be. Yijai-hai was hugging my waist, while I could see Shin Yu-seung and Yi-gil-yong holding onto each of my legs. And then I saw Han Soo-yong pounding on the barrier of the most ancient dream in my stead. Open up. We didn't come here to harm you. We just want to talk to you for a bit. Even then, the barrier was only getting thicker. I knew the truth. That thing would never open up. I held the sword's hilt even harder. This is the only way. Jang Ha-yong shouted out, please, please stop. There's still time, we still have. No, we didn't have time. The longer we wasted here, the harsher and heavier the sparks surrounding us became. The most ancient dream is denying your existence. The child would continue to deny us. Then he'd erase his delusions. He would turn the reality of another world into something that's not reality. That was why the only one who could do this was Kugugugu. Thick fog suddenly came in from somewhere, and I picked up on the ominous power of chaos. Yu Young-hyuk's expression as he held the blade became weird. Why, you bastard? As he staggered about, the pitch-black fable leaked out from his mouth. That fable gurgled out and traveled down his chin, hit the floor, and finally formed the silhouette of a person. The blade of the heaven-shaking sword gleamed between the jet-black coat. A man who only lived for this moment was standing there now. The secretive plotter. The being who had even forgotten about his real name after experiencing countless regression turns. The man who lived only for the purpose of revenge was here. He glanced in my direction before slowly approaching the protective barrier. The secretive plotter ignored the dancing sparks and walked forward. In that exact moment, the most ancient dream's fable came streaming into me. I wanted to become like Yu Young-hyuk. Goosebumps rose up on my arms gradually. Why have I forgotten about the memories that ruled over my childhood? the protagonist stronger than anyone in this universe. It was obvious that the secretive plotter wouldn't be affected by the sparks. Just how many times have I thought about this within my imaginations, continuing on like some kind of obsession? No human can control every type of imagination. Just how often have I recited that name, every time bruises appeared on my arms and legs, and every time my lips burst open? And that's why the most ideal person to end this dream had already been determined. My sword slowly slipped out of my grasp. From here onwards, it was no longer my job. I just couldn't get in the way of this world's most fair revenge. Secretive plotter. Han Suyong cried out and ran towards him. So did Jiang Huiwan, Yijai Hai, and even the kids too, as if they had realized what the horrible thing he was about to commit would be. Unfortunately, my companions couldn't approach him, as if a transparent wall was blocking them, and only the secretive plotter alone crossed the platform and reached the bench with the child sitting on it. He wielded the sword loaded with the powers of breaking the sky energy and sliced apart the pitch-black sphere. When he did, the child curling up like a newborn baby curled up even further. I'm Yu Young-hyuk, I'm Yu Young-hyuk, I'm. The child continued to tremble under the faint rays of light. You are not Yu Young-hyuk. The regressor who had forgotten about his name through the eternity of regressions. Such a man was now announcing his name. I am Yu Young-hyuk. Episode 99, The Most Ancient Dream 3 Fin. Chapter 515, Episode 99, The Most Ancient Dream 4. That was the real voice of Yu Young-hyuk, the one that lived through 1864 lives. That voice was the evidence of the history starting from the 0th turn all the way to 1863rd. And the protagonist of that voice was saying this. He was none other than Yu Young-hyuk, and he was none other than the protagonist of the ways of survival. I'm I. The child shuddered pitifully, yet he couldn't open his eyes, as if he already knew his entire world would crumble the moment he did. The most ancient dream is denying his own dream. This is just an illusion, just an illusion, just an illusion. This is no illusion. At the same time as the secretive plotter said his piece, sentences began streaming all around the child. They were texts from the ways of survival that the boy read, that I read together with him. Sentences that kept me alive, and eventually would kill me too. And a certain man was speaking up within those sentences. Yi Hyun-seong, it's not over yet. Do not worry, I shall definitely end the star stream. I will never forget you, Shin Yu-seong. Those vivid sentences soon became stories. Stories were imagined, and the imagination was recreated as reality in a different world line. Not knowing that such a thing was happening in another reality, the boy kept desiring the story's continuation. To the next regression turn, and then to the next one. To survive, the boy imagined, while being pressured by his relatives, while being bullied by the school gangs. To not feel the pain, he thought about the next part of the story. I shall survive no matter what, and witness the end of these scenarios. He felt solace while looking at the unyielding protagonist, and within that solace, he wished for the protagonist to not give up until the end. Author Nim, for how long will Yu Young-hyuk's regression continue on? He wished for this regression journey to never come to an end. Tsu Chachu, the secretive plotter, didn't say anything as he watched the boy's memories stream by. He should be remembering every one of these events. All those resolutions he had never forgotten from the 0th turn all the way to the 1863rd. My companions and I also watched those. Yu Young-hyuk had collapsed after the secretive plotter left his body. He was groaning heavily from all the memories flooding in. Shin Yu-seong was continuously shedding her tears, while Yijai Hai plopped down on the ground. Yi Hyun-seong and Jiang Huiwan too were trying to endure while supporting each other's trembling shoulders. Now they all knew. They knew now that the secretive plotter needed to be compensated for his life. But even then. Shin Yu-seong muttered as if she was in a religious trance and looked up at me. as if she wanted me to tell her how to overcome this situation. Secretive plotter, stop, I said, stop. Only Han Soo-young alone resisted the shower of sparks right before her face and swung her fists constantly towards the empty air. However, the secretive plotter didn't look back. And so the pilgrim of the lonely apocalypse had reached the end of his pilgrimage. The heaven-shaking sword, that broke over and over again only to be patched up, was now quietly crying out. Finally, his constellation backer was before his eyes. It was you. The child's shoulder trembled pitifully, as if he was having a nightmare. This was a weak life form that could be killed off in an instant. His heaven-shaking sword screeched out viciously once more. This was the sword that cut down countless constellations. Not even Poseidon, not Zeus, not Nuwa, and not even the Dakibai king could escape from this very blade. No star in existence could survive after daring to oppose him. Here was the opportunity for his revenge, reached after experiencing 1864 lifetimes. The heaven-shaking sword slowly moved. Secretive plotter, no, wait, Yu Young-hyuk. Neither Han Soo-young nor I could stop it. This event, it simply had to happen. Shin Yuseung, tightly holding my hand, was crying, unable to close her mouth and gasping uncontrollably. Everything would end with this. I would no longer need to consume someone else's story. Yu Young-hyuk would be freed from his lengthy journey of regression. However, why wasn't that sword moving even now? The secretive plotter's heaven-shaking sword continued to wander in the air. The blade that threatened to cut the boy down at any moment was now simply brushing aside the eggshell-like protective barrier around the child instead. Even though its outer shell has been shattered, this bird couldn't fly off to anywhere. The boy's figure trembled uncontrollably. Ominous-feeling fables were now circling around him. Hey, this guy's drawing something in his notebook again. Tusk, he's so much like his mother. Are you Kim Dak-ya? By any chance do you know where your mother is right now? My C, don't you resent your mother? What was your mother like in the past? For how long are you going to keep quiet? If you don't say anything, the whole world will misunderstand you. Slice. The heave-shaking sword, wandering in the air, accurately cut down the sentences of those memories. The boy's trembling shoulders shook a little less than before. But why? My mind was thrown into disarray. How come? It was then that a true voice resounded out. Is this boy him? A man with a hulking physique rose up from the secretive plotter's shadow. It was the 999th turn's Yi Hyun-seong. The plotter nodded his head. Correct, this kid is my sponsor. Now this pisses me off. This little kid was the culprit of it all. Even the 999th turns Kim Nam-woon and Yi Jae-hai were here, too. They were the outer gods that endured the 999th turn. It wasn't only Yu Young-hyuk who wanted to destroy Starstream and end the most ancient dream. No. What was that in that case? The secretive plotter looked around at his vicinity instead of replying. The clamor of people flooding in and out just to catch the subway could be heard coming from the platform in the distance. He looked back, and the train we rode on was already gone. Instead, there was a Dihwa station-bound train that would ferry passengers to their unknown destination in this normal world. And then, the crowd of people brushing past us as if they couldn't see us at all. This station is Dihwa. People climbing aboard the subway even before the passengers could disembark first, people pushing and shoving each other, or hurling insults in others' directions. A granny was pushed aside by the disembarking wave of people and fell down. No one tried to aid her. The very first person to witness her plight was an old man sitting on the seats reserved for pregnant mothers. He stared at the granny for a little while. Before unfurling a newspaper he pulled out to cover up his vision. And above that newspaper, a headline of an article could be seen. The criminal's essay will be published. It was an article that I knew quite intimately. Many people read that, chatted about, and then forgot about that article. A tragedy with nothing special about it. At most, it was a tragedy that occurred to just one life. The secretive plotter and the outer gods were now looking at my fable. Their sorrowful eyes were looking at this tragedy that only went on for a little over a dozen or so years. Oh, you sad, pitiful child. I shuddered almost out of pure shock from those words. My own tragedy couldn't even compare to their pain. The sin of creating an even bigger tragedy because of my own should not be forgiven. Oh, hear ye, my dear God. I have endured a truly lengthy period of time just to meet you, but... The 999th turn Uriel reached out and touched the younger me's cheek. You are this universe's most powerless existence, aren't you? The child's body shuddered once more. I staggered unsteadily back to my feet. Is that why you needed us? This is a very cruel request for help indeed. You couldn't even control your own imagination, is that it? Something was wrong. A blade, I needed to find a blade. The 999th turn's characters were exchanging glances. For a quiet moment there, they were looking into each other. The first one to open her mouth was the 999th turn's Yijai. It's fine with me. However, will it be okay with you? You came here just for this, didn't you? It was rather clear who she was talking to. The secretive plotter paused for a little bit before replying to her. It has been difficult. This story was not something that could be wrapped up with that single line. The tragedy he had experienced must not be simplified like that. I wondered why it happened to me. I often wanted to give it all up. I lost count on how many times I thought about killing myself. The secretive plotter, keeping silent for a long time, eventually continued on. However, someone ensured that I could never give up. His hatred-filled eyes were not directed at the body. No, he was glaring at the boy's fable. Both the 999th turn, Uriel and Yehyunseong, knelt down and gently picked the child up in an embrace. Yijai and Kim Namwoon then held the boy's cold hands. The secretive plotter spoke up as if to proclaim to the world. Now open your eyes, Kim Dokya. The eyelashes of the child, soaked in cold sweat, trembled softly. His whole body shuddered uncontrollably, as if he was fighting against a lengthy nightmare. And so how long passed by like this? The child's eyelids slowly opened up. The boy's eyes were now looking at the world. He was now looking at the things he once believed to be his own delusions. He was now looking at the Archangel and the Emperor of Steelsword embracing him, and at the hands of both the Demon of Delusions and the Naval Admiral. And finally, really. And the protagonist of the story he had been watching for so long was right before him. Indeed, this is not a dream. Inside this weighty silence where no one spoke, the sound of something shattering could be heard. Tears trickled down from the child's eyes. I knew what those tears meant, and I also knew what the secretive plotter and the outer gods had done just now, and that was why I felt so tortured inside. That couldn't have been their choice. A being that lived with a certain story for a very long time would eventually become unable to escape from that very story. Just like how it was for Agars, Metatron, the Apocalypse Dragon, and the Dakibai King, it was the same story for the outer gods, too. Perhaps, could it be that the choice they made had already been predetermined from the beginning? I shouted out in a crying voice. He's the most ancient dream. He needs to die. If he's not dead, then your tragedies won't end. Your regression, star stream, all of them. You must not get devoured by that story. I don't need your sympathy. What I really truly want isn't a tale like this. Applicable individual is not a character. The secretive plotter was now looking back at me with eyes that I couldn't recognize at all. From within a story that I hadn't read before, he was staring at me. It wasn't just him, however. Uriel, Yijai, Kim Namwoon, and even Yehyunseong too. Applicable individual is not a character. 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 I dazedly stared at the continuously rising messages. The world's most righteous soldier. The noblest archangel. The general who doesn't tolerate injustice. The devil filled with hatred towards the world. the regressor who fought against the system called Star Stream. The secretive plotter and the outer gods were now looking at the world of this child, the world that was filled with nearly undetectable malice that could only be felt under the careful observation. Kim Nam-woon glared at the fable of such a world and muttered out, "Even without Starstream, the world remains the same." He sounded as if he finally figured out the enemy he needed to fight from now on. The fables, the secretive plotter, and the outer gods built up were now baring their fangs at the reality surrounding the child. At the end of the vast, lengthy pilgrimage, the regressor chose the world he discovered. The characters reaching the conclusion were finally breaking out of the tale. While embracing their god, they were now heading towards a brand new story. I shook my head like a madman and crawled towards them. This must not happen. I made a promise to end the most ancient dream, to end this tragedy. My hand barely managing to feel around the ground, discovered the broken blade. I did it with this eye. Kim Dokya. The secretive plotter called out to me. When I raised my head, he continued on with what he wanted to say. Do you remember the first scenario? The first scenario, the proof of credentials. The secretive plotter and the constellation saw me for the first time during that scenario. You said this to other people back then, that the scenario's clear condition wasn't to kill humans. I recalled the promise I made to him. Please finish the most ancient dream. The world was blanketed by the blinding rays of light, and my vision grew blurry. My surprised companions quickly gathered around me. You have fulfilled your promise with the secretive plotter. The young Kim Dokya, now embraced by the Emperor of Steelsword and the Archangel, was looking at me. Light was starting to return to the child's eyes that used to wallow in the lengthy dream. When was the dream supposed to end? That would be when the dream was no longer a dream. Only then did everything start making sense. It was the same thing as the most ancient dream, ending the moment Yu Young-hyuk of the Ways of Survival reached this place. The sounds of the next train arriving could be heard coming from the distance. Constellation, secretive plotter has reached his black. At the same time as the secretive plotter gave his signal, my companions and I got sucked into the train that arrived behind us. This place is the epilogue of that story. The characters that saved my childhood were now disappearing beyond the door. Just like the 1863rd turns Yu Young-hyuk who killed himself to cross over to the New World line, they were now stepping into a world that I didn't know. Within the rays of light, I saw Yu Young-hyuk's faint smile. He looked liberated. Constellation, secretive plotters, Black Square is most ancient dream. Episode 99, The Most Ancient Dream 4, Finn. Chapter 516, Episode 99, The Most Ancient Dream 5. The fourth wall is reactivating. The light in the world flickered on and off several times. I felt the sensation of my body being sucked into somewhere, and within this half-awake consciousness, the friction noise of the train's wheel meeting the railroad tracks filled up my head. I couldn't accept this. Even though I knew that this wasn't a matter requiring my acceptance, I still found it hard to swallow. Why did the secretive plotter make such a decision? I couldn't forget his final expression. How could he make such a face? He didn't get to complete what he truly wanted, so how come? Wh did sec ret I've pl otter real I want thn. All of the memories regarding the secretive plotter flitted in and out of my head. The story I got to learn through the original novel's texts. While enduring such a vast, indeterminable amount of time, what did Yu Young-hyuk hope to see at the end of this road? Just what was it exactly that he expected to encounter? Even if it's not a conclusion you wanted, do not think of this world as a failed regression turn. Only those words remained stuck in my brain like a curse. Kim Dokya. The fourth wall warned me in a stiff voice as if to punish my arrogance. Thai es not a problem yo ka and ju dg. The wall was right. Even after that guy had left, I couldn't escape from being this damn constellation. Under the brilliant radiance, the figures of 999th turns Uriel, Yehyun-seong, Kim Nam-woon, and Yejai-hai scattered away. Could he really become happier with this? He made this choice himself, so was that his happiness then? He was a being born in the tragedy, so maybe he wasn't aware of that choice being another tragedy. The fables of the younger me and the secretive plotter were getting further away. The man looking back in this direction, for one last time, was no longer Yu Jung-hyuk from the ways of survival. Bika uses be ornan thitra, jedi ka enhifin ish thitra jedi tu. This place is the epilogue of that story. The ancient tale I've been reading concluded, just like that. You have reached the black square of all the scenarios. You have now learned of the secret of the world. The only remaining topic for us was on how to live the story, ever after, the part of the story that the ways of survival didn't tell me. The most ancient dream has ended. Abruptly, a certain thought popped up in my head, something that had been forgotten after being swept up in the situation. The Dakibai King told me this, that this world was a dream of the most ancient dream. In that case, what happens to the characters of the dream after the dream has come to an end? The characters from the 999th turn and the secretive plotter had all escaped from the role of characters and were freed from the dream through their own will. If so, what would happen to other people then? After the dream was over, the people from the dream would. Final scenario, clear reward has arrived. The noises of a cheek being slapped around resounded out. Under the flickering subway lights, Kim Dak-ya slowly opened his eyes. Hey you awake now? He saw Han Soo-young's face up close as she roughly held him by his collars. What happened? That's what I want to ask you. Kim Dak-ya massaged his head as if he was suffering from migraine and stood up from his spot. Where are we? Inside the subway. Time for us to head back home, I guess. Han Soo-young saying those words seemed rather refreshed, for some reason. The train clunked and shook around. The darkness outside the windows gently wavered about. Dakyusa-sai, are you all right? His companions discovered him and walked in closer. Yu Sanga, Ye Hyunseong, Jiang Hui-won, Shin Yu-seung, Ye Gil-yong, Ye Jai-hai, Jang Ha-yong, and even Yu Jung-hyuk, they were all here. Everyone was all right. Kim Dak-ya slowly looked around him. There was no other presence within the subway. It was likely that this train was the same one they rode in earlier. Are we really safe now? I've treated your injuries. Once we return to the fourth wall, we should entrust you to CLHWASC's care, but... Yu Sang-ah, feeling for Kim Dak-ya's pulse, faintly smiled. His companions approached him one by one. However, even though their gazes were fixed on him, none of them managed to readily open their mouths. Unexpectedly, the first one to do so was Yu Jung-hyuk. Rather than approaching Kim Dak-ya like everyone else, he leaned against the subway seat at an angle and glared outside the window. The universe's fable was coming undone on the outside. The once-dangled roll of thread was turning into dust and scattering away one strand at a time. It's the star stream. Fables existing in countless world lines were illuminating the space by scattering their bright lights. The star stream they had been living in was right there. The world they cursed and resented, but still couldn't forsake, was slowly disappearing while emitting the most radiant light for the last time. As Kim Dak-ya dazedly stared at that spectacle, Shin Yu-seung tightly squeezed his hand. It's over now. Overcome by a certain emotion, Ye Hyun-seong suddenly broke down in tears. The bear-like man who never showed a single drop of tears no matter what transpired began sobbing away uncontrollably. Jiang Hui-won watched him and bit her lower lip as her nose tip began stinging as well. Ye Jai-hai raised her head, perhaps not wanting to shed her own tears. It really is over. It was indeed over. This long and expansive tale had finally come to an end. Kim Dak-ya stared at the distancing meteor shower. He stared and then stared again. As if she knew what he was thinking about right now, Han Soo-young addressed him. This isn't because you read that novel, you know. You also had no idea, right? Companions nodded their heads. They were also aware, they knew that this event might not end like this. It was just that, they were quietly staring at Kim Dokya and his fable. The world that couldn't be lived in, unless one read it. The child who had to read something, anything, if he wanted to live. They were saved many times over by such a child. Reading something in order to survive, that was the same story for everyone. It would have been fine by just reading it, but Dokya SSI, you tried to change the story by yourself. I think that's more than enough. Jiang Huiwan said that. The one who had never reached the end of this world, starting from the beginning of the ways of survival all the way to its conclusion. She softly smiled and patted Kim Dokya on his shoulder. So what do you think? Is this the conclusion you wanted to see? Kim Dokya couldn't reply to her. He was too busy wiping away the tears clouding his vision to do that, so that he could see with his own eyes the view of the world he established. Kim Dokya slowly opened his eyes, and the subway's pitch-black windows were reflected in his irises. The faces of his companions could be seen mirrored on the glass, as if that was a group photo with the universe serving as its background. The conclusion of this world that he so dearly wished to see. I'm looking at it right now. As if they were waiting for those words, Shin Yu-seung and Yi Gil-yong began wiping away Kim Dokya's tears. He tightly hugged both of the kids. It was then someone asked this question. We'll be happy after this, right? Only the vibration of the train leaving the station resounded out within this silence like a pulse. Maybe this train would never go back. They would never be able to visit that station ever again. They would forge ahead towards a brand new terminal. As everyone stewed within their own thoughts, quite unexpectedly it was Yi Jai-hai who threw out a realistic question first. By the way, what will happen to the world line we've been living in? When everyone gazed at her, she scratched her cheeks in embarrassment and continued on. You know that thing. If the Dakibai King is to be believed, this world is merely a dream of the most ancient dream. But if that dream is over, then for sure, the time flow of the world they were living in froze after the final wall was destroyed. In that case, even if they return to that world by riding on this train, it'll be fine. Our world is functioning normally. Aha, I see, that's a relief, Ing. Yi Jai-hai stared at Kim Dokya, then at Yi Hyun-seong, and even at Jiang Hui-won and Yu Sang-a. No matter who she looked at, though, they were all making the exact same expression as her. Who replied just now? And then everyone looked up at the air at the same time. A ball of fine fur was floating up there. Baat. The eyes of the companions narrowed down to slits. A baat. Bu began sweating buckets in the air, but eventually sighed out grandly and spoke up. You knew something was up already anyway, so why are you so surprised? The companions heard the explanation from Bu. The contents, when simplified, were like this. The world line hasn't been annihilated yet. I don't know the reason, but the stop time of the world is beginning to get written again, you see. Although the worldview shook around a lot after all the large fables crumbled at the same time, it'll still take several thousands of years for the world to die naturally. The sights of the world they used to live in could be seen faintly just beyond the subway's windows. The frozen time of the world was beginning to move once more. Uriel was slowly opening her eyes within this devastation. The black flame dragon was asleep, curled up into a ball, and wrapped up tightly within the somersault cloud. The great sage heaven's equal was staring up at the skies above. The constellations were alive too. Even the maritime war god, the Goryeo's #1 swordsman, everyone was still alive. Even though they had lost their previous luster, they were still drawing breaths in this world line. Bu spoke up as she looked at those constellations. Starstream still remains. The channel system has crumbled down, and constellations can no longer wield as much power as they used to. But still, it was such a huge fable that it'll take some time for it to completely crumble down. A couple of my companions sighed in relief, a sigh that they themselves couldn't really understand. Yi Jai-hai asked again, but the dream is over, right? So how can this world continue to exist? I already told you, I also don't know. Be smart enough to listen properly when someone tells you something the first time. Well, it sure is a relief, but since when did you learn to speak like this? Besides all that, look how rude you are. Ajasi, listen to how Biyu talks, this creepy kid until now. Kim Dakya shifted his gaze over to Biyu, prompting the latter to feign complete ignorance and open her mouth as if she didn't know anything. Abulat. Everyone broke out into a helpless chuckle. Yijai panted angrily, and just before she could shout something, Kim Dakya reached out and wordlessly hugged Biyu. This bundle of fur that used to be so tiny at the beginning of the scenarios was now so big that one couldn't wrap their arms around it. Yu Younghyuk, watching that spectacle, spoke up. Maybe it's the last miracle. A miracle, was it? That was certainly a word that didn't suit him, because that was the one word he believed the least. Even then, his utterance loosened the expressions of the companions. Then really, everything has been resolved with this. And now, all we need to do is to buy the big house where we can live together. The kid spoke up, only to be shot down by Han Soo-young. Our nebula can't go on anymore. This idiot, he completely drained all of its finances in the final scenario, you know. We can always make more money later, right? I mean, just who are we? Everyone broke into smiles while looking at Yi Gil-yong triumphantly shouting out. But then, someone quickly threw out another question, perhaps fearful of these smiles suddenly coming to an end. What do you all want to do now? Shin Yu-seung and Yi Gil-yong looked at each other after hearing that and yelled out. The Han River. The ocean. Pizzas. Fried chickens. As the two children began arguing, someone else piped up next. I'd like to go to the place that I used to live. It was Jang Ha-yong. The place where you used to live. Yu Sang-a's expression became uncertain after hearing that. It wasn't just her, though. They all knew the truth. They knew that the places they used to live no longer existed. The homes where their stories had been kept before the advent of apocalypse had all disappeared now. But could this be magic? Suddenly, the view outside the windows changed. The scenery of the space seemed to scatter, and what replaced it was. Maybe it really is a miracle. The sight of Seoul, the one they were intimately familiar with. And on the subway map, where every name had been erased off, names of various stations began reappearing. Next stop is Hongyi Station. Jang Ha-yong's steps took her towards the exit. From beyond the wrecked terminal, the site of her old suburb could be seen. The train's speed was gradually slowing down. Jiang Huiwan asked her, "You still want to go, even though there might be nothing left?" Jang Ha-yong nodded her head. Jiang Huiwan could only reply with a wry grin. Like how it was with everyone, there were some things that had to be confirmed even if you knew the end results already. Okay, let's meet again back in the industrial complex later. The train's doors opened, and Jang Ha-yong made her exit. She looked around with a disbelieving expression, only to turn back as if she abruptly remembered something she wanted to say. Kim. However, the train started again, even before her words could be heard. The next person to speak was Yi Jai-hai, silently staring at the map until then. There's a place I want to go to. Jiang Huiwan asked her, sounding as if she already knew where the younger girl wanted to go. You want me to go with you? Nah, I'll be fine alone. This is what I want to do. Yi Jai-hai's grin was soft, her expression light. Jiang Huiwan's hand rising up sheepishly went back down. See you guys in a sec. Yi Jai-hai disembarked. The school building she used to attend was visible in the distance. The subway's doors closed once more. Jiang Huiwan asked a question. Is there anyone else who wants to go somewhere? No one answered back. Most of the companions had no places they wanted to return to. However, that didn't mean they didn't have a place to return to. Yu Sang-a then asked everyone, "We are all going to get off at the same place, yes? Can't we switch trains somewhere? Looks like we'll have to hoof it from Jongro." Han Soo-young grumbled and scanned the subway map. Their destination was Gwanghwamun, the location of the industrial complex. We gotta think up of what to tell the others. It's not like we can tell them everything, right? Next stop is Jongro 3rd Street Station. Everything was resolved now, but in reality, it'd be not like that. They would be facing the reality of new daily life after their return, that's why. The train's doors were opening up. Yu Sang-ah, holding the children's hands, lightly hopped off to the station's platform with a soft "Yusha." She looked back and saw that both Yi Hyun-seong and Jiang Hui-won had also lightly hopped past the safety line on the ground. "What are you doing, not getting off?" That left only 3 people behind. Kim Dak-ya. It was unknown who among Han Soo-young and Yu Jung-hyuk called that name out first. The former asked with a questioning pair of eyes. "We are getting off together, right? Someone has activated lie detection LV." That prompted Kim Dak-ya to smirk softly. "Of course we should." Lie detection has confirmed Kim Dak-ya's words as truth. "Let's go." Kim Dak-ya took a step forward and lightly slapped the backs of the other 2. That caused the 2 to stagger forward as well. The frowning Han Soo-young muttered something in Kim Dak-ya's direction, while Yu Jung-hyuk grasped the hilt of his sword, his eyes glaring non-stop. Kim Dak-ya spoke to the latter. "You do know that the scenarios are over, right? From now on, it'll be a criminal offense to carry around a sword." What a foolish utterance that is. It's not over yet, Kim Dak-ya. He's right. We haven't even figured out who TLS 123 is, and also. The subway's doors were slowly closing. The story of a new world was streaming within the noisy clamor of their voices. Kim Dak-ya laughed in genuine happiness, and the kids continued to bicker away. A tale of this new world continued to flow on. But then, just as the subway's doors closed, Han Soo-young looked behind her with a slightly unsure, hard-to-read face of someone that left something behind. Even Yu Jung-hyuk looked back too. The only person who didn't was Kim Dak-ya. Han Soo-young and Yu Jung-hyuk's gazes ran into each other, and they began growling at the same time. "What you looking at? I should ask you that, you basta." And then the doors closed. The subway began moving again in silence. It was leaving the station that welcomed the beginning of a new story to enter the railway of infinity. Names written on the subway map began disappearing one by one. The sight of bickering Yu Jung-hyuk and Han Soo-young could be seen in the distance. Then, the sight of brightly smiling kids holding onto Kim Dak-ya's hands, as well as Yu Sang-ah looking up into the sky while shielding her eyes, could be seen, too. And I was quietly staring at that scene. That prompted the fourth wall to ask me, "Will TH's Ray ally be okay?" Right in the next second, my transparent figure emerged from the empty space. Accompanied by a slight case of dizziness, my body fully materialized and revealed itself above the subway. "The percentage of memories you currently retain is 51%. I smiled wryly. This was the only way. I looked up, and the messages clogging up the message log all floated up at once. "You have cleared the final scenario. You are the only person who knows the secret of this world. Currently, the most ancient dream is absent. The world's time will not flow if the dream doesn't continue." These were the messages only visible to me. "You have earned the qualification to take over the role of the most ancient dream. Will you continue with the dream? If this dream was to be stopped now, then the world would forever be frozen still." It truly was a cruel thing. The world that barely managed to gain a chance at happiness stopping for all eternity. Although it started off as a tragedy, this universe was already born. Even though that was the case, there were still some that searched for happiness in this universe, and they had finally reached the terminals they always wanted to get to. Yusung Ian Gil, Yongi YLLBSAD. I know. YOR deceiving THM. At least I didn't lie to them. I looked up at the sky and carried on. A part of me definitely exited the train with them, didn't it? There was a certain skill I got from the secretive plotter while returning from the 1863rd turn. What will do you now for skills? I'm sure you haven't earned a new skill over there. Indeed, I haven't earned any skills, but is it possible to receive this type of a reward instead? Is possible. What I received back then was, technically speaking, not a skill per se. Currently, bookmark skill is in activation. Due to the blessing of the most ancient dream, the applicable skills activation period has been changed to infinite. Currently, the sixth bookmark is in activation. The character registered in the sixth bookmark is Director of the False End. The Director of the False End, the 1863rd turns Han Soo-young. Your degree of understanding on the applicable individual is very high. Exclusive skill Avatar LV is currently in activation. You have used up 49% of your memories to generate an avatar. Due to the influence of the world line, the connection to your avatar has been cut off. The applicable avatar will possess its own free will and act accordingly. This is the right way. I felt around the lost portion of my memories, now faint and staggered unsteadily. My other me would continue to live on, oblivious that he was an avatar. He'd live in a huge house with the other companions. He'd go to the ocean with Gil Yongi and eat pizzas with Yu Seung-yi. He'd get to see Yi Jai-hai admitted to a university, and then he'd hand over the congratulatory bouquet of flowers to Yi Hyun-seong and Jiang Hui-won. He'd go around house hunting with Yu Sang-ah and search for TLS 123 with Yu Young-hyuk. And then he'd get to read the novel Han Soo-young wrote. That would be my salvation. From the beginning till the end, I was always the one being saved. So this was my small bit of atonement for their sakes. Yoyll regret ths uont ever me et thm again. I smiled without a sound. But I can still see them right. Just like how it used to be, a really long time ago. And so, this story would continue on in that manner. That's enough for me right now. I stared at the back of the subway disappearing into the darkness. Now, the figures of my companions couldn't be seen all that well. And everyone lived happily ever after. I always hated that phrase. However, the current me dearly wished for that phrase to become true. Constellation, Demon King of Salvation, has reached his black. You have become the most ancient dream. The disappearing lights in the distance resembled the constellations that still remembered me. And with that, my endless voyage got underway. Your black is eternity. Episode 99, The Most Ancient Dream 5 Fin. Chapter 517, Epilogue 1, The World of 1. The panoramic view of the cosmos could be seen beyond the pitch-black window. I rested my forehead against the cold glass and wordlessly stared at that dark world. I couldn't tell how long it had been. I wanted to look back. If I did, then maybe they would still be sitting in their seats even now, so I thought. Kim Dok-ya finally stopped crying. I didn't cry, you dumbass. He lied too. Just for how long are you going to stay as the narrator? The story, over now. The fourth wall cackled on. I felt slightly encouraged by that laughter and took another look beyond the window. The ones I wanted to see were no longer reflected on the glass. The planet Earth I used to live had grown distant beyond my reach. Of course, that didn't mean I wasn't there. Avatar skill is currently active. Due to the separation of the world line, the connection to the avatar has been cut off. Your avatar will continue to live his life with its own ego. The me of 49%. The applicable avatar will no longer be under your control. That guy would never realize that he was an avatar. He'd simply live the life of ever after along with the companions as Kim Dok-ya. High 49% though ugh. I was trying to divide exactly by 50% each, but it didn't work out. High 49% though ugh. The exact same question again. It was impossible to hide anything from the fourth wall. You already know why. Anot vi kiyu. No, it is exactly like me. Something that the idiotic, immature, and selfish during the crucial moments, Kim Dok-ya would have done. 2%. That number was the proof. and the lie that I remembered my companions far better than my avatar. Even if no one knew of this version of me existing here, even if the companions' stories had come to an end like that, but at the very least, I swore to myself that I'd never forget about them. Why ore greeting it? A soft noise came from the clunking subway. I was treated to the view of a completely empty subway interior. The handles no one held onto limply shook about. Don Tifi el solo Nelly. I'm not. I slowly regulated my breathing. I had already experienced a similar situation before. It was also like this back when I became the demon king of salvation and fell into the story's horizon. In a way, my situation was better than back then. Well, I wasn't currently suffering from the penalty of leaving the scenario after all. If there was one thing different from back then, it'd be I'd never be able to meet my companions. Do I have to stay inside this subway forever? STOY. I'm asking if I can go outside. The fourth wall remained silent as if to ponder what I was asking here before making its reply. THR is no concept of access in T his pilasi. What do you mean? T his pilasi is a sanctum. A pilasi we re the most ancient dream sli eps. After I heard that, it began to slowly dawn on me. Every world line related to the ways of survival was a dream of the most ancient dream. All the worlds were dreams that were given life in this place. Along with a flash, all the windows of the subway transformed into display screens. At first, I mistook them for the TAS installed in the special area within the subway network. Scenes from various scenarios were streaming past the windows. Of course, there was no way that I was looking at mere S. Sujachachu. A vague migraine assaulted me. The sights of the world lines scattered around the universe were now streaming by. Only then did I gain a new appreciation of just what kind of an existence I had become. He was now the most ancient dream. My shaky steps took me closer to the window. The screen gently trembled like the surface of water, looking fragile enough to be broken at any time I wanted to. Kim Dokya was scared. I didn't need someone to tell me that to know. Every story in this world existed only because a reader read them. If he doesn't watch, the world will come to a stop. Staring at the world and dreaming endlessly. This was the weight the most ancient dream had to bear. I slowly closed my eyes. This was what I chose, and obviously being able to watch was far better than not being able to. And on top of that, it was the same thing as me having become the ultimate constellation that could peek on every world line out there, so. The fourth wall. WH chat. The most ancient dream acted like a constellation, didn't he? Under the guise of a constellation, the previous, most ancient dream sent messages during the regression turn I lived in. Although it was the subconscious actions of a child who didn't know anything, there was no denying the fact that such an action nevertheless interfered with the system. Correct. Then, how about me connecting to the world line I lived in as a constellation? YOTH Inc. TH at YLLB possible. It's not. And not the problem of possible ID or not. I mulled over what that could mean for a bit before biting my lip hard. Right, I shouldn't do that, I understand. I recalled all the hardships my companions and I had to experience to reach this conclusion. We fought to eliminate the constellations and to erase the star stream system, and we succeeded. But for me to revive Starstream after coming this far, now that would. Lucy Kylie yo can't even if yo want inted to. Why not? I'm the most ancient dream now, aren't I? If I imagined it, it'd become reality, right? Kaent control everything, just because cy or the most ancient dream. Sparks gently danced along with Su Chuchut. It seemed that the current me couldn't fully exercise the most ancient dream's power to influence. Why our masked Uri over the Dr. Eam is into and all. As I thought, if it was that easy to control, then it'd not be called the dream in the first place. I didn't know when it'd be possible, but at least for now, I couldn't do it. I chewed my lips for a little while before continuing on. In that case, what about just watching? It was right then, something inside me wiggled. The inner me that I couldn't rule over, I sensed this humongous subconsciousness taking root deep within me. This subconsciousness extended its roots towards another world line, and through these roots began pulling up the stories of this world. My vision darkened, then the sights of the world line spread out like a kaleidoscope. It was the view of the world he missed so much. I thought I saw the distant lights of the industrial complex. Then, I saw the backs of my companions headed there. Not a shade of darkness could be spied on their expressions. In the middle of the group as they walked shoulder to shoulder was another Kim Dokya, kitted out in the white coat. I already knew. Even though I knew. My heart crazily pounded away, my breathing getting shallower faster. I panted heavily and screamed out. I endured the sensation of vomit welling up, shook my head and opened my eyes. As I felt for the floor while swimming in dizziness, I realized that I was the only one inside the subway. W hats WR duent wan na wat ch. I did want to watch. Their happy faces, their expressions of finally escaping from the scenario's hell. I wanted to read the story that I so desperately longed to see. However, I couldn't. If I did, then without a doubt I'd want to go back. I have to see it right. If I don't, the world won't move forward right. Why al ria dai wat ching? What? Subconsciousness is a part of consciousness. Why al ria dai wat ching the majority of world lines? In that case, no need to burden why ours elf the fourth wall spoke as if to console me. Why od on have to do an ithying? Why al ria dai wat ching subconsciously and ill? I could just close my eyes and forget everything. It'd be fine to enjoy myself within the dream just like a pure, innocent child with no guilt weighing me down. The fourth wall was telling me that there was absolutely no reason to mull over the tragedy once more and get hurt in the process. However, Kim Dokya wasn't a child. I can't do that, said I while wiping away the cold sweat. All these world lines were my sin. I created them and I destroyed them. I must see them. And this was the only way to atone for them. As I slowly stood back up, the world lines appeared on the windows. The countless world lines from the ways of survival, the tragedies of someone brought to reality because I had read them, were now being displayed there. Perhaps there was something I should see first before seeing the stories of my companions. As if it knew that already, the fourth wall addressed me. YLLB a V uri long ni GHT, Kim Dokya. I'm sure it'll be. I smiled back. Don't worry, I can do this properly. This is the story that I adore the most, you see. I know I can definitely watch it until my dying day and not get sick of it. But why me GHTGR out to H8 the Cent or UL of the Mo Cent 1DI? If that happens, I spoke while reaching towards the scenes appearing within the screen. That will be the price I must pay. I slowly pressed on the glass, and my fingerprints were engraved on the display. The world is now receiving your gaze. A world line has received the power of life from your consciousness. When I reopened my eyes, my body was levitating off the floor, about a handspan high or so. It felt like I was having an out-of-body experience. I was startled by the bustling nearby and looked around to discover a crowd of people. They walked right into me and past me as if I was invisible to them. Every one of these tired faces belonged to the office workers on their way home. This place. I scanned my vicinity and saw the orange color denoting the subway's third line. Surprisingly enough, I found myself floating above the subway platform. The current time and all sorts of subway-related information were displayed on the LED screens installed on the ceiling. 6:55 p.m. Exactly 5 minutes before the beginning of the scenario. Soon enough, the Bulgwang station-bound train arrived along with the noisy announcement. People climbed aboard the train one by one. I'd have stopped them if only I could. However, nothing would change even if I did. The scenario would begin regardless of where you were anyway. All I could do now was to climb aboard the train along with them and watch all these tragedies unfold. And a face Kim Dak-ya was intimately familiar with was there. The Bulgwang station-bound train No. 3434, the car number 3707. A certain man, absent-mindedly staring outside the subway window, was there. After observing his face for a little while, I ended up smirking a little. When I thought about it, it was pretty obvious. In the end, all these world lines were repeated through one man's regressions. So, it was only obvious that I'd encounter this fool at the beginning of the story. This world's protagonist. Quite obviously, Yu Young-hyuk failed to sense my presence. No, his disinterested gaze remained locked on the outside of the subway, his mind currently submerged in his thoughts. A face that remained calm even when knowing that the scenarios were about to begin. I had no choice but to be impressed by that. You're really an amazing guy, aren't you? I had already witnessed the end of the scenarios, but my skin still trembled simply by re-entering this scene. Yet, you managed to endure these moments dozens, hundreds of times. The stopped subway train began moving and the time flowed forward once more. That thing should begin soon, if my knowledge served me correctly. During the third turn, Yu Young-hyuk would begin by killing everyone within this subway car. I recalled the beginning of the third turn that I knew of. I wasn't sure which regression turn this was, but the beginning wouldn't be so different from that. I slowly scanned the surroundings and spotted a man acting suspiciously by the exit. Yu. Several people shifted their gazes over to the man after hearing his intermittent grunts. The man carrying a twisted expression sniggered and looked around himself, then suddenly pulled out a homemade bomb and a lighter. On that day when the paywall began, there was a certain man riding on the same subway car number 3707 as Yu Young-hyuk. What's that? Hey man. The subway terrorist Choi Han-jae. The shocked crowd screamed and retreated. People freaked out after witnessing the sparks exploding from the man's hands and stood up from their seats, causing the scene to turn chaotic. As for Yu Young-hyuk, he was quietly staring at that man. Hey, what are you doing? Hurry up and snatch that away. According to the storyline I knew, Yu Young-hyuk should have suppressed Choi Han-jae the moment they climbed aboard the subway and took away the bomb. However, he hadn't done that. Why was this? Yu Young-hyuk's expression, the one I thought was calmness personified, was now pale white in fright. It was then the interior of the train became dark along with the screeching noise. People's screams morphed into sorrowful cries as they witnessed the flame being lit up within the darkness. Something had gone awry here. Why isn't Yu Young-hyuk making his move? Hang on a minute, could this be? 7:00 p.m. And then as the tick noise resounded out, the world's rules changed. The free service period of the planetary system, number 8612, has concluded. Main scenario has begun. The flames lit up by the terrorist brightly illuminated Yu Young-hyuk's face, his eyes trembling in pure fear. He stood there, unable to do anything. I, too, had fallen into a bout of panic. Pages of the ways of survival began flipping inside my head. Just which regression turn was this? Was this around the 900th when he lost his mind, or around the 1200th? During which regression turn was this half-wit Yu Young-hyuk? Channel B7623 has opened. Constellations are entering. Yu. The crowd began running towards the next car of the train, away from the figure of the terrorist clutching the explosive, as the man's eyes glared at the surroundings. Extremely small number of constellations are getting interested in Incarnation, Choi Han-jae. And Yu Young-hyuk was still standing in the same spot, the one I knew would never react like this. No, Yu Young-hyuk was someone who'd resort to the perfect showmanship to suppress the situation from the get-go. But now, he was making this stupid face that I had never seen before under the terrorist's threat. One I had never seen before, never seen. It felt like a lightning bolt had gone off in my head. So that's what this was, this storyline. Countless pages flipped inside my head before the book itself was closed shut. This was the regression turn that got treated as nothing more than a passing reminiscence back in the ways of survival. Some stories would actually begin from a moment that wasn't written. Please don't kill me. Alisk. This story is the unknown beginning of the ways of survival. This world line was the one that I didn't get to read, Yu Younghyok's zeroth turn. Epilogue 1, The World of Zero 1 Fin. Chapter 518, Epilogue 1, The World of Zero 2. Yu Younghyok was reading the article of a portal site on a person's phone next to him. Pro-gamer Yu Younghyok, for how long will he stay under the radar? Several private matters that other people didn't know, such as discord between the teammates and the tyranny caused by the director's high-handedness, brushed past his mind. However, they were stories from years ago, and he couldn't think of an answer no matter how hard he thought about them. We found their home address. That text message appeared on his smartphone. It was from the detective agency he hired, letting him know that his parents had been located. This was the reason why he decided to step outside the house for the first time in a while. Yu Younghyok wished to know about his origins, to find out who gave birth to him and who had abandoned him, to find out who left behind a little sister in his care when he was on a fast track to success. Yu Younghyok also desperately wanted to find out. NG, did people like that live here before? AIing, I don't know either, it's been too long. Even though he spent a considerable sum to hire the detective agency, the only thing he got in return was an address of an empty house. The agency told him that there was nothing more they could find out. His parents were gone without a trace, as if they had evaporated from this world. How could such a thing happen, though? 28-year-old Yu Younghyok seemed to exist all alone, without being able to recall a single memory concerning his parents, or anything nostalgic from his childhood, as if he was a being crafted to be an adult from the moment he was born. As he rode in this noisily clunking subway of the third line, Yu Younghyok was facing a philosophical quandary for the first time ever in his life. Just who am I? And that was why he didn't react in time. Yu. He noticed the ruckus only after a short while later. A giant of a man, with a scraggly beard on his chin, the homemade explosive device clutched in his hand, and the cogged wheel of the lighter turning with pronounced tick, tick. Only after someone smacked past his shoulder did he awake to this surreal situation. The terror. The lights in the subway went away the next second. The train came to a sudden emergency stop, and the surroundings rapidly filled up with darkness. Yu Younghyok felt all the hair on his arms stand up. The inside of his head felt dizzy. Was this really an act of terror? Something that he'd only ever heard about was really happening in South Korea too. Where should he evacuate to? Should the police be notified? Or, welcome everyone, nice to meet you. Yu Younghyok's dilemmas were carefully extinguished by a small CGI-like lump suddenly appearing in midair. It's getting tiring to make the same introduction over and over again, but anyway, this situation isn't a movie shoot nor is it a terror incident. NG. These creatures would later introduce themselves as Dakibus. That unknown existence floating in the air observed the situation within the train and broke out into a wide smile. What's this? Ha 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 ha. Dear constellations, please take a look over here. The scenarios haven't even begun yet, but something entertaining is already underway. The Dakibai spoke in a languid but cruel tone of voice and laughed. I'm already beginning to look forward to this particular car. I pray that you'll all show us an entertaining tale. Main scenario has arrived. Main scenario 1, proof of worth. Type main. Difficulty F. Clear condition. Please kill one or more life forms. Time limit 30 minutes. Reward 300 coins. Failure death. And hell began from then. Bihyung, that fool. He was rather adorable back then. There used to be a moment like that in the past, didn't it? While listening to the screams resounding out within the subway, I fell into a bit of ill-timed reminiscence. Are you saying you want to sign the stream contract with me? It felt like only yesterday that I met the guy for the first time and discussed getting into an exclusive contract with him. Back then, I really got lucky. If I failed to sign the contract then, Kim Dakya, you and I aren't comrades. Then Bihyung wouldn't have died on that day. I actually wanted to witness your fable till its end, though. Maybe you Younghyuk, trembling over there, might get to feel this sentiment after going through over 1,000 regressions. Scenario, what is that? The passengers of the car number 3707 began murmuring after receiving their very first scenario. Desperate struggles taking place in other locations were then broadcast on the panels in the air of the scenario where if you didn't kill, you'd be killed instead. A G game, this is a game, the terrorist Choi Han-jae was shouting out. Ha 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 ha. Choi Han-jae the terrorist. Information regarding him appeared once in the ways of survival via Yu Younghyuk's reminiscence. If Choi Han-jae manages to survive, he'll evolve into demonic bomber at a later stage. Choi Han-jae pulled out a hammer from his side and proceeded to hit the back of a middle-aged man's head right next to him. The victim's knees powerlessly buckled. If I do this. Incarnation, Choi Han-jae has achieved the feat of first murder. Choi Han-jae began his awakening as he stared at the coins raining down before him. Just like how it always had been, the ones that adapted fastest to Star Stream were those that couldn't adapt to the real world. Did you all see that? I just now. Murderer, he's a murderer. Choi Han-jae watched the crowd freak out and retreat away from him and tilted his head. Why are you all not doing anything? Why you're all making me look like the strange one? Don't come near me. And maybe you need this. He smirked towards the crowd, and then suddenly chucked several tools hanging on his sides towards them. He then wielded the spanner once more and slammed down on the back of the already dead man. It's easy, L like this. You do it L like this and then. Sprays of sticky bloody rose up from the back of the man. Then, everyone can become rich. The timer in the air was ticking down bit by bit. Remaining time has decreased. Remaining time, 10 minutes. Yu Younghyuk wordlessly stared at the spanner that rolled towards his feet. Even then, the crowd showed no signs of movement. Choi Han-jae shook his head as if he was disappointed and stood up from his spot. Should I just kill everyone? But then, a man suddenly reached out and grabbed hold of a hammer that Choi Han-jae had thrown. Fuck this, I don't know anymore. Ajasi, what are you doing? This man gripped tight the thrown spanner and began attacking everyone next to him indiscriminately. This was the car No. 3707 that Yu Younghyuk managed to survive. Forgive me, I'm sorry. As voices futilely spread out, people began waking up to the new reality. They couldn't tell what kind of a situation this was, but they were sure of one thing. They'll die if they don't kill each other. Extremely small number of constellations are satisfied by the sight of the applicable subway car. Extremely small number of constellations are expressing their interest in incarnation, Choi Han-jae. A constellation who hasn't revealed their modifier is sponsoring incarnation, Choi Han-jae, with 100 coins. Choi Han-jae was laughing in satisfaction at the crowd. As for me, I was watching all these happenings next to this man. Kim Dak-ya. I slowly removed my hand from Choi Han-jae's neck. I know already, so don't worry. I must not change this story. Everything happening now was events that have already happened. I looked at Yu Younghyuk. He was bending down to pick up a spanner that came from Choi Han-jae's possession. I could vividly feel the deep conflict he was in from his expression. It was an expression of a man who had chosen to take a life. But why was this? That expression was different from the Yu Younghyuk that I knew. The one that I knew would gnash his teeth from someone's betrayal. Yu Younghyuk, who didn't trust others easily nor easily made comrades. Yu Younghyuk, who always pursued after the most optimal route and didn't hesitate killing others ahead of time if they were going to betray him later. That was why the third turns Yu Younghyuk could slaughter the fellow passengers of the same subway. However, this Yu Young-hyuk before my eyes wasn't from the third turn. Not from the fourth, not fifth, and definitely not from the 1863rd either. He was the 0th turn. Yu Young-hyuk of the 0th turn. His feet broke into a sprint. His feet that couldn't use either the red Phoenix Shunpo nor ways of the wind yet. There were plenty of targets present. A trembling college student hurtled on the floor, a middle-aged man hiding next to the disabled seating, an office worker, too absorbed in assaulting the others and not having enough time to look behind. Yu Young-hyuk ran past all of them, and then he selected the hardest opponent within this subway car as his target. Yu. Choi Han-jae smiled insidiously while observing the spanner flying in. He took an agile step back to evade, then an ultra-sharp survival knife jumped out from his waist. Along with the swish noise, Yu Young-hyuk dodged the blade with nary a gap to spare. Why did Yu Young-hyuk make this choice? I couldn't tell. Why did this guy, frightened out of his mind, make such a choice? Choi Han-jae still carried several other tools, and not only that, he was in possession of a homemade explosive as well. On the other hand, all Yu Young-hyuk had was a spanner as thick as a child's arm. Even then, I wasn't worried. Although I didn't know the finer details of the 0th turn, Yu Young-hyuk wouldn't die in this place. Not before he got to experience all these tragedies, and not before they led him to that vast cycle of regressions. Yu Young-hyuk wouldn't get killed. Incarnation. Yu Young-hyuk's attribute, Pro Gamer, is awakening. He was awakening his exclusive attribute, the one that I was quite familiar with. It was a skill that allowed him to digitize everything in this world like a video game and analyze them. A skill to control his body as if he was moving his game avatar. His spanner accurately struck Choi Han-jae's wrist. The bomber screamed out for a moment as the homemade explosive fell out from his grasp. Yu Young-hyuk's spanner then accurately flew in towards the neck of flustered Choi Han-jae next. It was an unavoidable attack, a perfect counter that his talent had calculated. Unfortunately, even he had failed to take into account this one thing. Incarnation, Choi Han-jae, is investing 900 coins to stamina. And that was precisely the system of this new world. That hurts. Although a dark red mark was left behind on Choi Han-jae's neck, it wasn't broken. His muscles swelled, and he grabbed Yu Young-hyuk by the neck. The latter's complexion paled greatly as he dangled up in the air. While grabbing hold of his victim's collars, Choi Han-jae's free hand picked up another hammer. Die. Right in that moment, Yu Young-hyuk saw the fallen, homemade bomb on the floor, and I realized what he was thinking of. Yu Young-hyuk throwing the spanner in his hand, and I making my move, happened simultaneously. The time flow slowed down greatly. The slowly flying spanner was accurately heading towards the center of the homemade bomb. I quietly stared at this spectacle. Even if that thing went off, Yu Young-hyuk wouldn't die. That simply had to be if what I read was correct. But why was this? Why were my hands shaking so much like this? The fourth wall. After hearing the air making the tsu-chuchet noise, I continued on. Does Yu Young-hyuk's sponsor exist in this world? He exists. The most ancient dream existed in this world. The being that became the most ancient dream much earlier than me, the younger version of myself, or something that was presumably my younger version. If that's the case, why can't I sense anything? That's what's been bothering me. I could sense everything in this world, everything in the scenarios, including individual incarnations, all the way to the constellations blanketing the heavens above. However, I failed to sense just this one thing. Where is the most ancient dream right now? The fourth wall didn't answer me. Yu Young-hyuk's spinning spanner flew in and was about to reach the homemade explosive. Could it be? How did the most ancient dream manage to form a contract with the 0th turn's Yu Young-hyuk? All those questions simmering away inside my head until now were going off all at once. The most ancient dream dreams through the ways of survival. Indeed, the younger version of me imagined this world while reading The Ways of Survival. And The Ways of Survival was a story that started off from Yu Jung-hyuk's third regression turn. So could he even properly imagine The Ways of Survival's 0th turn? Was he even capable of picturing a story not mentioned in the original, a world that he hadn't read before? If that's the case, then just who was the constellation sponsor that appeared during Yu Jung-hyuk's 0th turn? The bomb exploded, the shower of debris flying out stabbed into Choi Han-jae's back, then into the bodies of people busy hacking away at each other. Accompanied by a loud screeching noise, the subway's ceiling was caving in. Several pieces of debris were flying straight towards Yu Jung-hyuk's heart and neck. Sujajajun, you're the owner of the final wall. Your mastery isn't sufficient enough to interfere with the world line. The world line's probability is resisting you. I ignored the probability and caught the flying debris. Along with the vicious heat enveloping my hand, the debris scattered into ashes in my palm. A Deus ex machina the world line doesn't recognize is activating. The world has sensed your interference. Right at that moment, Yu Jung-hyuk raised his head. Yu Jung-hyuk crawled out from underneath the collapsed Choi Han-jae and stared at me. Although it was for the briefest of brief moments, Yu Jung-hyuk felt that there was someone standing before him. Who? Main Scenario 1, Proof of Worth has concluded. You have acquired the normal clear reward of 300 coins. 100 coins have been deducted as the channel usage fee. Additional reward calculation has commenced. Along with the scenario calculations, the heads of the people began exploding, and as the deluge of blood rained down, I silently looked at Yu Jung-hyuk on the floor. Baehyung's excited voice coming from the distance, as well as the fourth wall's words of warning, could be heard next. Even the messages of constellations suspecting the probability streamed in, too. In the meantime, Yu Jung-hyuk was staring at the message spreading out before him with quaking eyes. Sponsor selection is commencing. Sponsor selection. Please select your sponsor. The backer you choose will become your trusty sponsor. 1. God of Wine and Ecstasy. 2. Mouse that eats fingernails. 3. Abyssal Black Flame Dragon. A new constellation has entered the channel. A new constellation is participating in the sponsor selection. 4. Demon King of Salvation. Epilogue 1. The World of 02 Fin. Chapter 519. Epilogue 1. The World of 03. Currently, the applicable regression turn is under the overwrite restriction. Currently, the applicable world line's copyright holder is absent. As the owner of the final wall, you can act as the substitute copyright holder. Will you activate overwrite to interfere with the worldview? The warning messages floated up one after the other in the empty air. Almost at the same time, the fourth wall's voice entered my ears. Kim Dak-yao. I know already, so stop trying to scare me. I could already tell what the fourth wall was going to say. Probably, it'd be something along the line of there's no meaning in changing the predetermined past. I sensed a certain glare squarely locking onto me from the empty air, but I tried my best to ignore that. Although I had no clue how the original 0th turn unfolded, if the paragraph I read in passing inside the fourth wall library was true, then the 0th turn's Yu Jung-hyuk shouldn't select his backer until much later. He would lose Yclhwa and Yijai during this turn. He'd lose the ones precious to him, those he barely managed to meet, and then, he'd desperately think about this one thing as his death approached him. If only I had a sponsor, what could it have been like? I stared at Yu Jung-hyuk as he read the system messages with quaking eyes. Through this turn, his cycle of regression would begin. He'd get to repeat countless regressions and thereby walk on the hellscape of eternity. Even if Ochungji turn. The past that the secretive plotter lived through won't disappear, I know that. Even if I changed this world line, the predetermined tragedies would still happen. The Yu Jung-hyuk I know would live through the first, second, 3rd, and eventually, all the way to 1,863rd regression turns. He'd become the secretive plotter and start hatting me. However, even if that was the case, I can't pick up any traces of the most ancient dream that isn't me in this regression turn. It was quite likely that the cause of this event was the younger me not knowing anything about Yu Jung-hyuk's 0th turn. Whatever the case might have been, one thing for certain. At the very least, I could take on that role during this world line. I could become Yu Jung-hyuk's sponsor during this world line. YLLY Omakihim Regri SS. The fourth wall asked as if it was intrigued. I shook my head. No, I'll make sure he doesn't. Even if he's changed, the future won't. I know, that's why I feel even more relieved. The past I changed wouldn't deny the Yu Jung-hyuk I know of. If Yu Jung-hyuk got to experience a regression turn that wasn't tragic, even if it's just once. I slowly extended my hand towards the air. Overwrite has commenced. Interfering with the applicable worldview has begun. As your mastery over the dream is insufficient, currently it's impossible to interfere too aggressively. As the sparks exploded with a loud su-chut-chut, messages popped up one after the other. The Demon King of Salvation is registering his temporary constellation name. You're currently participating in the sponsor selection as a constellation. Starstream system is suspicious of your eligibility. Low-grade Dakibai Bihyung finds your modifier unfamiliar. Small number of constellations are flustered by your sudden entrance. I bit down on my lip while observing Yu Jung-hyuk's pale expression. This might prove to be a bad decision. Yu Jung-hyuk might end up even more miserable because I changed this world line. However, if it was the me of right now, Ho-Ora, the Demon King of Salvation, well now, a new constellation Nim has decided to enter the stage. If it was Kim Dak-ya, the most ancient dream, who had witnessed the end of one world and had the knowledge of the scenario's epilogues, then wouldn't it be possible to change the predetermined destiny? Looks like we might need to extend the time since the candidates have increased. Bihyung updated the message floating in midair. Sponsor selection time period has been extended by 5 minutes. The survivors in the near vicinity, having somehow lived through that ordeal, began opening their mouths one by one. Just what is all this? Sponsor selection, is it? I didn't find it weird since I had read The Ways of Survival before, but still, I could guess how confused they must feel after facing a situation like this for the first time ever. Incarnation, Yu Jung-hyuk is activating his attribute. In the midst of all this, only Yu Jung-hyuk was regaining his cool. His calm eyes were proof of that. Well, I'm getting curious about what he's thinking here, so. Exclusive skill, Omniscient Reader's Viewpoint LV, is activating. Although I felt a bit sorry about taking a peek inside the feeble 0th turn's head, I simply had to look this time. What if, in a 1-in-a-million chance, he chose a different backer then? You are the most ancient dream. You can utilize 100% of your skills, abilities, regardless of your understanding on the target. The inside of Yu Jung-hyuk's head spread out like an anatomy chart. What about Mia? What happened to her? I must rescue Maya. In order to do that, I must get through this selection thing before my eyes first. Backer selection. Sounds like I must pick my sponsor. I grew slightly tense. During the original 0th turn, this guy apparently didn't choose anyone as his backer this early on, but that always be nothing more than a story from the original. No one could tell what might happen this time. Unexpectedly, though, it was Yu Jung-hyuk displaying his interest in me, but other constellations. Constellation, God of Wine and Ecstasy, is greeting you. Constellation, God of Wine and Ecstasy, thinks your modifier is a cool one. It seemed that Dionysus's outgoing personality was the same regardless of the regression turns. If he didn't yield to us back in the final arc, the ensuing battle would have been so much harder. Just as I was about to greet him back, someone else butted in. Constellation, Abyssal black flame dragon is keeping his eyes on you. Now that I thought about it, this dude was also here, wasn't he? Hey, you, aren't you supposed to be eyeing Kim Nam-woon in the next subway car? Just how many bridges are you planning to straddle here? Constellation, Abyssal Black Flame Dragon, thinks you are copying from his modifier. I was about to ask just which part sounded the same to him, but in the end, held back. Only 3 minutes remained. No need to waste my energy on something completely unnecessary. I shifted my head to discover that Yu Yonghyuk had begun considering his choices earnestly. I swallowed back my nervous saliva. One god of wine and ecstasy. Yu Yonghyuk stared at that modifier for a little while before shifting his gaze away. Something feels messy about that name. Soon after, his eyes landed on the second candidate. To mouse that eats fingernails. I grew nervous when he stared at that modifier for quite a long time. Wake up, Yu Yonghyuk. You'd be better off choosing the Abyssal Black Flame Dragon instead of this. Sounds weak. I barely managed to breathe a sigh of relief. Damn it, man, stop making people nervous. Yu Yonghyuk then stared at the third candidate afterwards. 3. Abyssal Black Flame Dragon. Although obvious, Yu Yonghyuk would never choose the third option. He might seem drunk on his awesomeness outwardly, but in truth, he wasn't a fan of such flashy and grand-sounding words. That's why. That's a fairly strong-sounding name. Wah hang on a. Maybe it might be an unexpectedly powerful sponsor. It's true that he's powerful, but that guy, he makes his incarnations recite weird summoning spells, you know. Hey, Yonghyuk, please open your eyes properly and take a closer look. The only ones that can handle this guy are Kim Nam-woon or Han Soo-young, that's it. Constellation, Abyssal Black Flame Dragon is boasting in your direction. 1 minute remaining until the conclusion of the sponsor selection. And finally, Yu Yonghyuk's eyes landed on the fourth candidate. 4. Demon King of Salvation. I barely managed to calm my mind and along with Yu Yonghyuk, looked at the backer selection list from behind him. The god of wine and ecstasy, mouse that eats fingernails, Abyssal Black Flame Dragon, and the Demon King of Salvation. The fourth wall, what do you think? As if it didn't get the intention behind the question, the fourth wall took its time answering back. What I'm asking you is, who sounds strongest to you? That is. Not including the actual combat prowess, just judging from the modifiers alone. I thought that a reply should be forthcoming pretty quickly, but it seemed that the fourth wall was actually in a dilemma here. I didn't wait and spoke up first. Not saying this because I'm the Demon King of Salvation, but in truth, and also, objectively speaking. Hang on, no need to look at it objectively either. Just think about it logically. The god of wine and ecstasy, he simply sounded like a drunkard. The mouse that eats fingernails. You weren't looking for a nail clipper substitute, so what would you even need this guy for? The Abyssal Black Flame Dragon. Just one look and you should know not to choose this guy. Even if the zeroth turns Yu Yonghyuk was an idiot, he should not be making such mistakes. The only normal-sounding modifier was mine, and for sure, he raised his finger and pointed at the fourth option as if he was impressed by my modifier. Then, he began thinking. What an arrogant-sounding name. Weaklings often use names like this. Even before I could shout something out, Yu Yonghyuk shot up from his spot and spoke. I've made up my mind, I will. As he formed a triumphant grin, his lips slowly parted. I silently stared at the subway's ceiling, accompanied by the tsu-cha-cha-chut noise. Vicious heat burned on my hand. You're interfering in the world line. Overwrite has commenced. Excessive interference might cause the world line to strongly resist. I used all of my strength to smack the back of Yu Yonghyuk's head. Kyo-hyak. Kim Dak-ya woke up from the powerful impact on the back of his head. How long are you planning to sleep? Wake up already. He opened his eyes and found Han Soo-young lightly dusting her hands. He then wiped away the drool marks on the couch and gingerly sat back up. What's this? Why am I here? Okay, so. What are you doing? Hurry up and get ready already. Did you forget where we're supposed to go today? Yu Young-hyuk, standing in his trademark pose, was standing next to Han Soo-young, his eyes still blazing non-stop. You're making us wait for no reason, he said. It wasn't just him, though. Jiang Hui-won's head peeked out from behind Yu Young-hyuk, and the figure of Yi Hyun-seong carrying an armful of something could be seen behind her. Is that pizza? It's fried chicken, you dummy. Shin Yu-seung and Yi Gil-yong were swallowing their saliva as they continued to stare at Yi Hyun-seong's plastic bags. And finally, Yi Jae-hai standing next to these two children, too. Hurry up and let's go, I'm starving. Kim Dak-ya saw this spectacle and finally remembered what today was. This world scenario had ended. When he turned his head, he saw warm rays of sunlight seeping through the industrial complex windows. And today was Kim Dak-ya Company first field trip. As they made their ways towards their destination, Han Soo-young continued to grumble away. Hey Kim Dak-ya. What now? You didn't really forget what day is today, right? What day is it? It's December 25th. What day do you think it was? Kim Dak-ya pondered for a little bit before replying to her. The day Mitra was born. Is that supposed to be Veda's-style humor? They continued walking while exchanging banter like that. Every so often, Yu Young-hyuk let out a pained groan as if they were getting on his nerves. It was around then that a red sports car came to a stop on the side of the road while making a loud noise. Sang-ah SSI. Jiang Hui-won was first to recognize Yu Sang-ah and quickly raised her hand. The latter, kitted out in a white long padded coat and a pair of jeans, took off her sunglasses and replied back. I'm so sorry, the filming took longer than I thought. Perhaps finding the current Yu Sang-ah not to her liking, Han Soo-young verbally tackled her down right away. Oh my, you sure are a full-fledged celeb nowadays, aren't you? Do we really need to eat by the Han River when it's so cold outside? Is there anyone here without cold resistance? I mean, you should still have that sort of a skill remaining, right? We could have just eaten back in the complex, though. As it's Christmas, there should be quite a few people by the river, too. We made a promise with the kids. While watching the two of them bickering away, Kim Dak-ya felt a certain corner of his heart ache for some reason. Why did this sight feel so nostalgic to him? It had already been 3 months since the scenarios came to an end, so. What about CLHWASSI and PIL2SSI? I can't see the department head Han either. They'll be here. Ah, there they are, Oyai, YCLHWA. Right in front of the UNRU station, YCLHWA, wearing a white fur coat, was waving both of her hands with a bright smile. And next to her was Gong Pil-do, staring in another direction with a cantankerous expression. You didn't want to show up for so long that we thought you forgot about us again. Perhaps she felt guilty after hearing that. Jiang Hui-won quickly replied. Ai, there's no way that's true, though. But you did abandon us and return to the industrial complex first, didn't you? We did go back to find you later, didn't we? What do you mean, find us? We only were able to come back because the librarians let us leave. Seriously, if I look back to that time, I still. What about Han Myung-oh? Myung-oh SSI didn't come, saying that he must spend Christmas with his family. What family does that Ajasi even have? The companions continued to walk forward under the noisy, festive atmosphere. Yi Gil-yong and Shin Yu-seung clung onto each of Kim Dak-ya's arms and growled towards one another. Hey you, stop pulling him to your side. You too. By the way, Ajasi, you think Santa Claus is a constellation too. The group eventually reached the Han River Public Park. Maybe the cold weather was to blame, as there weren't all that many people visible here. What was visible, though, were the collapsed bridges of the river, as well as the pitch-black night sky. Only an extremely few stars remained as proof of star stream existing up there once before. Without a doubt, everything did come to an end. The group laid a mat on the ground and installed a portable stove next to the children. Yu Young-hyuk then placed a picnic table next to the stove and proceeded to make something with Yi Jai Hai. Kim Dokya asked, "What's this we're going to make them here?" Of course, there are no fried chicken takeaways or pizzeria remaining, so obviously we have to make our own, right? He thought about it and realized that's true. It had been only 3 months since the end of the scenarios, so pizzerias or takeaways couldn't have been revived already. Han Soo-young carried on. "Be grateful that we have someone who can make them for us." Chicken drumsticks dismantled in an instant flew in the air, and Yu Yonghyok's special sauces danced enticingly just above them. Rolled dough spun vigorously at the end of the scabbard, too. It was uncertain whether he was making a pizza or fried chicken, but without a doubt, something amazing was being created right now. "In the end, a day like today did come," said Yu Sang-ah as she sat on the mat with her knees pulled up close. Her eyes were staring at the Han River, as if she was submerged in reminiscence. Kim Dokya addressed her. "You must be really busy nowadays." "It's just, yes, I am. There are lots of things to take care of, so." It had only been 3 months since the scenarios ended. The society at large hadn't regained its stability yet. The system's influence hadn't completely disappeared yet, and the criminals retaining their skills or stigmata continued with their crime sprees even now. Yu Sang-ah was this world's hero that defeated them and protected ordinary citizens. They looked so good together. In a spot far away, Jiang Hui-won and Yi Hyun-seong were standing together to look at the Han River. Han Soo-young pouted and spat out her words. "I bet 100 coins that they won't last a year." It was right then, they heard something exploding in the distance. The startled companions instinctively reached towards their individual weapons. But when they took a closer look, the explosion noise came from the fireworks fired from a distant building. "Someone's using stuff like that already." Han Soo-young muttered out in disbelief. Kim Dokya stared at that spectacle with renewed interest. Fireworks, was it? He never expected to see them again in his life. Bit by bit, the aroma of their food getting ready wafted in. Kim Dokya. "NG. You know, you haven't been reading that thing recently." "What do you mean?" Kim Dokya thought about it for a second before making his reply. "Ah, that's right, I should be reading it, though." He hurriedly switched his smartphone on. However, its battery was flat, and the device refused to power on. Han Soo-young's figure was reflected on the dark screen. It was still impossible to get a bead on her inner thoughts through the look in her eyes. She wordlessly observed Kim Dokya and muttered something to herself, before plopping down next to him with an oopsie. "Maybe I shouldn't have bothered to come. All these useless thoughts are making my head hurt instead. NG. Nah, just talking to myself. Never mind that, though, there was a part like this back in the Ways of Survival, wasn't it? You remember that?" Ways of Survival. You know, the third turns Yu Yonghyok. Everyone together next to the Han River, chewing on the ground rat's legs. Kim Dokya's expression, as he listened to her words, distorted in a strange, vague manner. She reached out to him as he began to wobble a little. "Hey, what's the matter? You all right? You feeling sick somewhere?" "It's just that my head hurts without warning." "Did I smack you a little too hard back then? How about resting for a bit?" "No, it's fine. Besides all that, you're right." "About what?" "About the Ways of Survival. I really like that scene too. It's the scene I like the most from the third regression turn." Han Soo-young deeply stared into Kim Dokya's face, before forming a refreshing grin. "Really now, you Ways of Survival otaku freak." Another round of fireworks went off in the distance, much larger in scale this time. The children let out a loud cheer as they witnessed the beautiful flames engraving the night sky. Kim Dokya began thinking, maybe this was the sight he'd been yearning to see for the longest time. For the longest. Longest? Han Soo-young opened her lips again. "By the way, Kim Dokya." "NG. Since from when was this?" Her face was pushed real close to his. Her pristine, perfectly set facial features, her pale white cheeks, and a beauty spot just below her sparkling eyes. Kim Dokya became flustered by the faint hint of lemony scent reaching his nose. Just before he could say something, though, Han Soo-young approached him even closer. She brought her lips to his ear and slowly whispered in a clear voice. Such a scene doesn't appear in the third turn of Ways of Survival. Along with the fireworks scattering in the sky, it felt as if a powerful shower of sparks were raining down from somewhere. Kim Dak-ya thought that his vision was flipped around for some reason, only to realize that he was currently thrown onto the ground unceremoniously. Hey you! Han Soo-young's icy-cold, venomous eyes were right before him now. Everything was definitely over, yet. Why did it feel like nothing was over somehow? Jiang Hui-wan and Ye Hyun-seong running over here from the distance could be seen. Then, the expressionless face of Yu Young-hyuk, and finally, even the world where all the stories had concluded too. Under the fireworks brightly dyeing the night sky, Han Soo-young's chilly, sharp dagger gleamed dangerously. You, just who the hell are you? Epilogue 1, The World of Zero 3 Fin. Chapter 520, Epilogue 1, The World of Zero 4. Han Soo-young continued to experience this weird feeling every single day for the last 3 months. It all started rather innocuously, though. Yu Young-hyuk, did you know? Know what? That guy, he enjoys his tomatoes now. At first, she dismissed it as just a trivial little change. Scenarios were over now, so the dude must be changing bit by bit too, or so she thought. Hey Kim Dak-ya, why are you so absent-minded lately? By the way, are you sure that the scenarios are really over? Why isn't the system gone? You can still use your skills, right? It might take a little while longer for everything to go away. The scenarios were over, but the world didn't immediately revert back to normal. As if there was a story that hadn't ended yet. The proof of that was how people still could use their skills or stigmata. To be more specific, you can't say that everything is over until we find the original author of that novel first. Han Soo-young agreed with Yu Young-hyuk's opinion. It was possible that this world existed because the most ancient dream read the ways of survival in the first place. Before all that, though, was the author who penned the novel in question, meaning this story would end only after they found that creature first. Just who is TLS 123? We came up with a few guesses so far, but they were all wrong, right? The most plausible candidate, most ancient dream, didn't look like the author either, and hey, Kim Dak-ya, what do you think? The one with the highest likelihood of solving this quandary was Kim Dak-ya, the reader that managed to read through all 3149 chapters of Ways of Survival. However, his reply was this. I wonder. Well, I kinda wonder if that's really important now that we've come this far. Other people could say that fine. However, he was none other than Kim Dak-ya, the sole reader who read the entirety of Ways of Survival till its end. He was Kim Dak-ya, the greatest reader Han Soo-young ever knew. Speak, who the hell are you? That's why Han Soo-young began wondering. If Kim Dak-ya before my eyes is a fake, then Soo-young SSI, what are you? Just as the voice of Ye Hyun-seong rushing and reached here, Shin Yu-seung grabbed onto Han Soo-young's wrist. What do you think you're doing? Nuna. It was the same for Ye Gil-yong, as well. The boy awkwardly blocked her front and looked up at her with nervous eyes. The atmosphere of the companions changed drastically once they discovered her sharp dagger. Iani, can you explain yourself? Ye Jai-hai had put down the kitchen knife, and before anyone noticed it, was standing next to Han Soo-young while gripping her twin dragon sword. Ye Clhwa was completely taken aback, while Jiang Hui-wan's eyes were narrowed to slits, and Yu Sang-ah, calmly observing the unfolding situation unlike the others, was seen next. Han Soo-young thought about something for a little while, then let go of Kim Dak-ya's collars while spitting out a long sigh. He plopped down powerlessly and looked up at her like a guilty man. This guy isn't Kim Dak-ya. I'm not talking about anyone else but Kim Dak-ya here. No way he can't remember that thing. What are you talking about? The ways of survival. After hearing that, the companions all simultaneously looked at Kim Dak-ya's face, at Kim Dak-ya, who used to talk non-stop about the ways of survival every day. As if she was a lecturer trying to explain a migraine-inducing problem, Han Soo-young held her head and began laying out her case in a calm, logical manner, and even decided to add this at the end, too. What I said just now wasn't from the ways of survival, but something from my own novel. There aren't any scenes of the companions enjoying their meal by the Han River in the ways of survival, you see. How do you know that, Ione? Did you actually read that novel too? Just the early parts. At least, I know for sure that no such scenes appear during the third regression turn. That prompted Jiang Huiwan to retort. Isn't it possible to be mistaken about something like that? From the get-go, remembering every event happening in such a huge novel is. It is possible if it's Kim Dok-ya. Did you all forget how we managed to wrangle our way through the scenarios, and you really think that Kim Dok-ya can't remember? Han Soo-young turned towards Kim Dok-ya and growled menacingly. Hey, you, tell me how many times Yu Young-hyuk killed Asmodeus. Her question simply caused Kim Dok-ya to dazedly look up at her face. She scowled deeply, but just before she could go on another tirade, his lips opened first. Han Soo-young. His voice sounded flat, monotonous. For a moment there, a certain expectation of maybe flashed past by Han Soo-young's eyes, and then, my bad, but I really can't remember. I haven't been reading the ways of survival lately, so. Look, this punk, he's not Kim Dok-ya. Ajasi. The one to step in front of the dagger-brandishing Han Soo-young was Shin Yu-seung. As if she was trying to mold a clay pot, she held Kim Dok-ya's hand with both of hers and asked him, Do you remember what I wanted to eat by the Han River? The hands of Yu Young-hyuk standing not too far away and silently preparing the food came to a halt. The food wasn't finished yet. Kim Dok-ya replied immediately, It's pizza and cola. Hyung-mi, what about me? Gil-yongi, you wanted to eat chicken by the sea. My bad. We'll definitely go to the seaside next time, okay? Gil-yong's and Shin Yu-seung's tearful eyes were now glaring at Han Soo-young. She frowned deeply. Hold up, your questions are too easy. With only that you can't. That prompted Jiang Huiwan to step forward this time. Dok-ya SSI, what's the name of my sword? The judge's sword. I struggled so hard to get all the materials for it too. Dok-ya SSI, do you remember the very first item you gave me? It was an aged iron shield, wasn't it? The companions then began their barrage of questions as if it was a competition. Even Gong Pildu got in on the act too. Oi, do you remember the penalty fee you paid me during the Chungmuro scenario? But I didn't pay anything. You son of a bitch, you better cough up or. Ajasi, you told me this before, right? Jai Haya, to be honest, I think you're the prettiest among all the Kimcom members. I never said that. Jai Hai muttered, dang it, under her breath. He's Dok-ya Ajasi, all right. There was this vague sense of relief blooming on the expressions of the group. Kim Dok-ya, observing this situation, spoke up. I don't know what's suddenly gotten into you, but I'm definitely Kim Dok-ya. And Han Soo-young, why are you? Hey, do you even remember how many regression turns there are in the ways of survival? Soo-young-ah. Jiang Huiwan couldn't let this go on any longer and stepped forward. I don't know why you're acting like this, but we're on a rare outing together, so please do it in moderation. That's right, Soo-young SSI. There must have been some kind of a misunderstanding. Misunderstanding? Han Soo-young's hand gripping the dagger trembled ever so slightly. Hey, Yu Young-hyuk, don't you have anything to say? Yu Young-hyuk, chopping up veggies in silence, heard her call and shifted his disinterested eyes towards Han Soo-young. Then, he shifted his gaze over to Kim Dok-ya before glancing at the rest of the companions. Finally, he turned his attention back to the cutting board. After observing that chain of events, Han Soo-young's shoulders began trembling nonstop. Why you, really? Her head dropped, and that's how she spotted a can of beer rolling on the floor. She picked it up and popped the lid open, then drank it all in one go. She wiped her lips in anger and spoke up. Screw it, fine, sure. I'm the lone weirdo among you, is that how it is? Maybe that one can wasn't enough. She proceeded to pop the lid on another one. Fine, I know it's been difficult for everyone trying to break past the scenarios. I know full well that you're too tired to think and now you just want to kick back and relax. You think I don't want to do that too. I also want to take it easy. Along with the pashashak noise, beer foams bubbled up vigorously. But then, you idiots, you really think this Kim Dakya is the real deal. Han Soo-young. Shut up, don't call me by my name. Her cheeks were getting somewhat flushed now. Meanwhile, the fable of predictive plagiarism was creaking into gear inside her head. It's possible that the companions are right. She's wrong, and it's totally possible that this Kim Dakya is the real thing. Han Soo-young knew, just because he failed to remember a couple of scenes from the Ways of Survival. Could she really use that to argue this Kim Dakya wasn't really Kim Dakya? The current her acted too hastily. She failed to be logical. Even then, Han Soo-young couldn't stop her emotions. Even as she herself failed to understand the reason behind her own strong reaction, she continued to mutter on. The Kim Dakya I remember is. He was a man who could patiently read a boring novel filled with a ton of exposition that lasted well over 3,000 chapters. In the future, when all the scenarios have ended, I may want to get back to writing novels again. When that happens, read my novel, okay? A man who loves stories more than anyone in this whole world. Fine, fine, I'll definitely read it. But it might be over 3,000 chapters. That's probably right up my alley then. It might be boring too. It's you writing it, so that's not possible, you know. Such Kim Dakya might forget about other things, but no way he'd forget about the Ways of Survival. Was this the fault of the alcohol? It felt as if the heat was gradually spreading even more inside her head. If this Kim Dakya is a fake, what does that signify? A trickery of the original author TLS 123, or Han Soo-young, why don't we stop there and? A certain hypothesis popped up in her head as she looked at the expressions of her companions. If what the Dakibai king said was the truth, then this world was nothing more than the delusion of the most ancient dream. Meaning, this world existed because he continued to dream. But now, the most ancient dream was no more. He disappeared along with the secretive plotter, as well as the characters from the 999th turn. In that case, how can this world continue to exist? This was a truly horrifying hunch, one that should never become reality, and perhaps a hunch that had already become their reality. The beer can in her hand fell and rolled around on the ground. Half-consumed liquor spilt out among the other similar-styled cans also rolling around on the floor. She stared at her can, now almost empty, and muttered out in a trance-like state. What if this Kim Dakya is an avatar? Soo-young SSI, what's suddenly gotten into you saying stuff like, "You think I'm doing this for fun?" Her serious voice caused the expressions on several companions to change. Those that turned back all carried similar kind of looks on their faces now. Han Soo-young, the only incarnation among the group that possessed both the predictive plagiarism as well as avatar skills. It was her who took on the role of the nebula's brain whenever Kim Dakya wasn't around. And her judgment was rarely, if ever, wrong. Yehyun-seong slowly turned his head to stare at Kim Dakya. Next up was Jeong Hui-won, followed by Ye Jai-hai. One by one, all the gazes were focusing on him now. What if Han Soo-young's words are correct? A faint crack was spreading within their minds, an opening created by a very minute suspicion. It was enough of an opening for Han Soo-young, though. Whether he's really an avatar or not, there is a simple way to find out. By the time Jeong Hui-won felt the ominous foreboding, Han Soo-young was already gone from her spot. Han Soo-young. Ye Jai-hai unsheathed her sword as fast as a bolt of lightning and rushed forward, but by then, Han Soo-young was already only a few steps away from Kim Dakya. As the incredulous torrent of wind stormed in, Shin Yu-seung let out an explosion of dragon howling. Ye Gil-young's insects were wrapping around Han Soo-young's ankles like chains, while Ye Hyun-seong dashed in to cover Kim Dakya's figure. Even then, Han Soo-young didn't stop. The dude who'll get to read my novel. Strings flying out from Yu Sangha's hand restrained Han Suyong's waist, and Jiang Huiwan, belatedly making her move, managed to grab hold of her target, back. But even as all these events were going down simultaneously, Han Suyong's dagger had already left her hand. "Isn't you?" Splat. The sound of something splitting up resounded out next. Epilogue 1. The World of 04 Fin.